Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is September 12th, 2024, and we are in part 2, knee deep, waist deep, throat deep, over our heads in Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. This is our second episode where Mormons / progressive Mormons / ex-Mormons react to this amazing Hulu series that's taking the internet by storm. We break down Secret Lives from a Mormon perspective so that you, the viewing public, can either feel represented if you're a Mormon / progressive post-Mormon, or so that those who have been never Mormon can know just how Mormon or not this series is. And we love to provide Mormon analysis as well. We kind of cheekily titled this episode, "Are They True Mormons?" Because that's going to be one of the major themes today, kind of the saints versus sinners dynamic. And we're really excited. We're going to be covering episodes. We covered episodes 1 and 2 along with some framework a few episodes ago. Go check those out because that will build a valuable foundation for what we talk about today. In the third part, we're going to cover episodes 6 through 8. So know that we're also going to do a final episode of this as well. We may try and get Dr. Julie Hanks to join us if we can. We may need to bring another chair to do that, because not only do we have the amazing Alyssa Witbeck back with us. Hey, Alyssa.
Hello, happy to be here.
And the fabulous Samantha Shelley from Zelf on the Shelf.
We're
But
so happy to be
if
here.
that weren't enough, we've got some Gerardo energy joining us today. Hey, Gerardo.
Hey, we also have Britt.
And of course, we have Britt. Hey, Britt.
Hey, John.
You're not gonna leave us early today, are you?
Well, stop talking so long.
Hey,
Not all of us have 6 hours a day for the Stories podcast.
I've
Just
been
kidding. I hope to be able to stay for the whole conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thanks
Drag
for joining
him.
us from a bunker in Boise, Idaho, right?
That's right.
All right. Well, let's begin. We've got a lot to cover. Alyssa, just for those who haven't joined us in the past, give us 30 seconds on your awesomeness.
Hi, I'm Alyssa. I'm a writer. I love reality TV. I also teach university writing courses that focus on rhetoric and composition. So analysis, critical thinking, all that stuff. And I feel like some of that will apply to our conversation today.
And you're also a mom.
And I'm a mom, yes. And I'm around the same age. So I would be peers to them, just not as cool.
Or cooler.
Or cooler. Yeah, exactly.
By the way, I got called out for using the term mommy. Margie, I got home and Margie's like, John, stop saying the word mommy.
No, it was funny.
And I was like,
I
whoa.
saw someone in the comments saying I can't take John seriously every time he says Mormon mummies.
I didn't know mommy was like a pejorative, but apparently it is.
Well, I didn't think you seemed insulting. But...
Anyway, I'm going to be more careful. I'm not going to say mommy. And Samantha, you're definitely not a mommy.
I'm a mummy to 3 kittens, fully grown adult cats, actually.
Wait, this is childless cat ladies are all in the news these days.
It's really nice that you have representation on this panel. Yeah, for that.
Do you support Taylor's recent? No, we won't get into
Yeah,
that.
of course I do, John.
So Samantha, tell us a tiny bit about you.
I'm on YouTube at Zelf on the Shelf and an avid watcher of reality TV, and there's nothing else in my brain right now other than this show. So very excited to be here.
You literally said this is your dream job, talking about reality TV for money.
Yeah, I mean,
What else is there?
like the only way is down after this, I fear.
Britt, remind us who you are and why you're cool.
Ooh, I don't know about that. I'm quite nerdy. My name's Brittney Hartley. I go by No Nonsense Spirituality Online. I don't do a lot of Mormon content anymore, but I love getting invited to jump into these Mormon conversations. Most of my work now is in talking about existential crisis and the void and nihilism. And I have a new YouTube channel under No Nonsense Spirituality with a series called 100 Tools for the Void.
I love it. And so make sure and subscribe in Britt's new channel. Again, what's it called, Britt?
Just No Nonsense Spirituality everywhere.
Yeah. And while you're at it, please subscribe to the Mormon Stories podcast channel and like it. Also know that we really welcome our panel. We welcome our live audience. We invite you guys to make comments, and super chats obviously will be prioritized. And, we love feedback. And so Maven's going to star those when they come up. But we also thank our regular Mormon Stories donors who donate at mormonstories.org and make all this possible. And Gerardo, remind us a little bit about you.
I've been co-hosting on Mormon Stories for a couple of years now, and I don't know what else to say about myself. I usually don't watch reality TV, but
Really?
Yeah,
You're into this one though.
I was actually not gonna watch it, and then I watched the first episode because like there were so many people talking about it on TikTok, and I was like, let's watch it. And I was I just binged it all Sunday. I haven't watched the last episode, but because I'm leaving that for I'm building up to it. But yeah, I really have a lot of stuff to say about it.
Yeah. So we're super happy you're here. Want to thank Unexcited. He's basically donating so that we have more female panelists. Does that mean I should go away or Gerardo should go away? Which, no, I'm just kidding. Thank you for that support, Unexcited. Okay. Well, we thought we would begin by bringing some faithful voices to our panel because none of us, is it fair to say none of us are kind of Orthodox Mormons? Is that fair to say?
I'm a little biased though, but I think
you're an Orthodox Mormon. Is that what you're saying?
No. I was just gonna say I think we are even more qualified to talk about it because we all have been all in, and then we're out. So we have like the in perspective of what it was like to be inside the church and how it is now to see it from an outsider perspective. So try to be as respectful as possible to people's beliefs because we were part of it, but then at the same time being able to talk about it for a broad audience that might not understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm guessing a lot of us would have judged those girls as not true Mormons when we were in the church. I know I probably would have. So yeah, we have dual perspective in that sense.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, that's a great segue to this next slide. We've put together a slide to help you know who's Mormon and who's not.
Who's
Is that
good
a fair
and
way?
who's bad?
What's that? Who's good and who's bad?
Who gets checks, who gets X's.
Yeah. Okay. So Gerardo, I think you helped put this slide together. Do you want to kind of explain to us what this slide's about?
Yeah. So there was a recent podcast,
Vile Files,
where most of the girls were on except for Whitney and Taylor. And they all talk about how the level of religiosity or how in they consider themselves to be in the church. And what we gathered, I mean, we can gather a lot of it from the show as well. And we'll start at the top left with Taylor, who was the only one from the group. And this has bothered me so much, John, like that everybody, especially all Mormons, are talking about like this is the swinging reality show.
That the show's about swinging.
Yeah.
But Hulu kind of is the reason why.
Yeah.
They marketed it that way,
but
right?
if you are going to be Hannah Syriac writing articles on the Desert News about a show, and you're going to have this supposed experts talking about how Mormons are not really swingers and this show doesn't portray real Mormons, like maybe you should be a little bit informed about the show, because Taylor is the only one that was involved in it. She's ashamed of it. She stopped doing it. She divorced her husband, who, her and her ex were involved in it. And now she's trying to go back to church. Yeah, of course she lives with her boyfriend without being married and stuff, but she's going to church. She's active.
So she gets a check, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and she believes it.
Yeah. And we talked, I don't know if you heard last episode, but we definitely talked about swinging being a thing, a long-standing thing in active, faithful Utah Mormon culture. We established that last time.
We established that no one's ever approached you to participate in swinging, and that's been kind of hard for you.
It's been a struggle. Yeah, but I'll try not to take it personally. Okay. So we're giving Taylor. I mean, Taylor starts as one of the most kind of presenting unhinged of the 8, but what you're saying, Gerardo, is give her a Mormon check because she identifies as a faithful Mormon, even though she realizes she's not.
I'm not sure if she will say I'm a faithful Mormon. She'll say I am a believer, right?
Yeah, she would definitely say she believes. She talks a lot about God and Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she understands the church. She
Mhm.
understands that what she did was wrong. That's not according to the standards of the church. She understands that. I mean, she's pushing the boundaries, but at the end of the day, she believes Joseph probably had a first vision, right? And translated golden plates.
And with episode 2, she's like, I'm going to try and come back to church
Right.
and try and be faithful, right?
And on the vow files as well, they said that she was actually going to church even when the swinging scandal broke.
Yeah.
So she never really had
Yeah.
a big break in time.
And let's just hit it. Like, this comes up later in the episode, but there's this point that's made: is church for the sinners or is church for the perfect? And this is something that's said in Catholicism and evangelical Christianity and Protestant Christianity all the time. Christianity's for the sinners. We're all sinners, right? And like, I guess people like Hannah Syriac or faithful Mormons want to say, oh, if you're sinning too much, you're not a Mormon. Is that kind of what we're addressing here? The fact that everyone's a sinner, so that doesn't disqualify you from being considered a Mormon?
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of what these women have said specifically, that's why they still identify with Mormon. They say, yeah, I'm not perfect. They have said multiple times that they're trying to bring awareness to an alternate route to Mormonism, to embracing, mistakes, or being open about, a lifestyle that doesn't align with everything that Mormonism promotes. And so they seem to really want to lean into that. Even the ones who are considered the saints in this series are saying, yeah, I'm not perfect. The church is for everybody. Nobody should be excluded.
Yeah. Okay, so Taylor's in. The next one is Demi. I always want to mispronounce that and say Demi.
Yeah.
What do we know about Demi?
Demi, she said that she is also a believing member of the church. She knows all the lingo. She knows, what to talk about the temple, when not to talk about the temple. She's endowed. I'm not sure if she has an active temple recommend. She didn't talk about that, but she has said that she drinks occasionally, but she doesn't see it as like any other mistake that another Mormon would make on a regular basis. And but she's tries to be active in the church.
Interestingly, like growing up as a Mormon, I didn't drink, but family members of mine drank, whether it was teenagers or young adults that were just exploring. And let's just say there were close family members who were adults who drank as a way to self-medicate or to calm down during a vacation. So like, and then when I came to Utah, it's almost like a thing for like Utah Mormon high schoolers to party
Right.
on the weekends, but then clean up for Sunday. So I mean, Mormons like to project the image of them not drinking alcohol, and there certainly are Mormons that don't drink alcohol, but there's plenty of Mormons that are active, faithful, and they do. Am I right? And Britt, you jump in at any moment, please.
Yeah, let me address this. It's interesting to watch the change in identity markers. So, drinking in early Mormonism, even with the word of wisdom, of course, anyone who listens to Mormon Stories podcast knows that alcohol was a huge part of our early culture. And then later on, especially with the For Strength of Youth pamphlet for like my generation as millennials, it was definitely an identity marker to be Mormon that you don't drink. And now we're seeing that Gen Z has its own identity markers for Mormonism. So things like tattoos and drinking and wearing garments, we know statistically that they don't see those as necessary identity markers to be Mormon. It's more so just, is your family Mormon and do you attend church? That tends to be more of the Gen Z identity marker for what makes you a Mormon. So we can see actually these markers for who's in and who's out of the community. We can see that change every decade, and something like drinking has gone up and down as an identity marker for Mormonism.
Yeah. Yep. I've thought about this a lot, and I think if we go by the standard that Hannah Syriac and other members of the church are applying, is what makes you a Mormon is not whether you're making mistakes or not, but whether you're being public about those mistakes. It makes you if you're hiding the mistakes and not talking about them, then you're a Mormon. But if you're public about them, all of a sudden you're being excluded from the community. Does everyone agree with that?
Yeah,
Seems to be-
secrecy is so Mormon. not just in these things, but the idea of, presenting a certain way. And historically, there's obviously been so many secrets within the church. And so that seems to be the most Mormon part of the culture. And I think that is what makes these women almost the least Mormon, is their willingness to like be open about all their quote unquote mistakes, and sometimes very valid mistakes. That's, I think, one of like the more fringy things that they're doing.
Yeah, they straddle this weird line between not having shame and having shame about the things.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. It
That's
reminds
that's
me
for
a
true.
yeah. It reminds me a lot to Elder Oaks, one of the LDS Church's apostles' obsession with people not identifying as gay, and then teaching in state conferences, do not identify as gay because you're just a son of God and that's what you should be identifying as. Or Russell M. Nelson, telling people there's the three identities that you should consider above anything else is that you're a son of God, son of the covenant, or whatever. This idea of, anything that's not related to, or that doesn't seem to be in accordance to the rules that we want you to follow, just don't be public about that. That seems like a very strong identity marker.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Anything else about Demi? She's a green check.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have Jen.
Oh yeah, Jen.
Who everyone in the group thinks she's the most Mormon.
Could we all agree she's like Mormon 10 level, 12 level Mormon, whatever the level is?
I think for the sake of this show.
Yeah, relatively speaking, but I feel like, well, when I was in the church, I wouldn't have considered her like a 10 out of 10 obedient just because she doesn't wear garments or.
But she does, but she wears nursing garments a lot of the time.
She does?
So they can be lower cut.
That's evolved. Cool.
But she doesn't every time. She's like, goes back and forth.
And it seems like a degree of her zealousness is related to who her husband is and him kind of.
To Zach. Yeah.
Wearing the pants in that sense. So I feel like maybe she's a bit more Mormon than she would otherwise be.
But definitely a green check.
Yeah, definitely
does
green
seem the
check.
most
She likes
Mormon.
to present that way, but she's also open online of being like, yeah, I'm super Mormon. And she also talks about Mormonism more in this series than most of the women, like in her interviews, talking about, trying to explain like the priesthood, explaining the church doctrine. And she seems like she's taking that role very seriously.
Yeah.
But then online she'll be like, yes, I'm Mormon, but I've also had sex before marriage, which I think most people would not consider that to be 10 out of 10 Mormon.
Yeah.
Although it happens a lot.
Although
even
it happens
at BYU,
all the time.
right? Yeah.
But like to Gerardo's point earlier, the fact that she says that is what makes her less Mormon than the fact that she's done it.
Yeah.
She has the most Mormon persona I've noticed in different scenes, where she's very much emulating the like ideal feminine
Mormon
and Mormonism.
Yeah.
Even though she's 24, but there's a scene where I think it's later, but she just seems like a 50-year-old Mormon mom in like her persona presentation.
I think I remember there's a rule in missionary handbook for missionaries that says to not talk about past sins with your companions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this idea of not talking about what you've done wrong.
Yeah.
Is pretty strong.
I remember General Conference talk that basically said, don't air your dirty laundry. And the idea is you just don't talk about any of the hard stuff, any of the mistakes, keep it positive, keep it upbeat. I think that's how we've been raised. But I also think these women are explicitly doing this series in their minds with the intent of opening things up, talking about things that aren't talked about, creating a bigger tent.
Right.
And oddly, that's why I started Mormon Stories. Like it's with that same intention.
Yeah.
So,
and they're not trying to change doctrine, because it's not doctrine that you shouldn't talk about the hard things or the things that you did wrong.
Yeah.
So they're just trying to change the culture.
Yeah.
Which Mormons, sorry.
Britt.
No, go ahead. I think what's interesting for me about her dynamic is the church and active Mormons were really concerned about the swinging element, and there was a lot of talk about the swinging element. But once you watch the show, there's really nothing about, that thing that happened in the past. And so while the church was concerned about the swinging element, what the world is noticing is that the most Mormon girl on this spectrum of Mormon religiosity is the one who has the most damaging marriage, like the most unhealthy rooted in patriarchy. She's making the money, watching the kids, yet somehow he's still, calling the shots and running the household as patriarch. And so, they'll say that they're pushing the boundaries, but I think what the world is seeing is like, wow, what an unhealthy marriage dynamic from the woman who claims to be the most Mormon. And I don't think that the church was really, has really responded to that side of the narrative because they were really focused on the swinging element. But I think that that's what, when I watch TikTok and non-Mormons watching this, they're just watching this Mormon who seems to be the most Mormon really have the worst marriage. And that's what they're noticing.
Yeah.
Ouch. Okay, so what else, just to clear this slide, what else do we got that's important, Gerardo?
Jesse is the only one that seems to have deconstructed the religion, or learned about the history and then left it completely.
Has she talked about that? I guess she did go on Girls Camp podcast.
Yeah, with Haley.
Did anyone watch that?
I watched
I
pieces.
did,
Some of
yeah.
it.
She said that she identifies as ex-Mormon.
Oh,
And interestingly, she also said that all of the women on the show recorded their stories of, their religious fervor and how much of the church meant to them. And she was open about how she no longer identified as Mormon. And on the Vile Files, she said she was a 0 out of 10,
oh wow.
which was interesting.
So she's the full-on ex.
Full on
Yeah.
ex-Mormon,
Yeah.
yeah. But the show cut all of that, which I think there was other drama going on, but it almost seems like, again, the analysis of whether someone is Mormon or ex-Mormon or post-Mormon seems to mostly be interesting to people within the group. We're the only ones that are making these distinctions. People that are watching, if you have any sort of adjacence to Mormonism, you get to claim the title.
Yeah.
So we're the only ones that are
Mhm.
really gatekeeping that.
Yeah.
And we did reach out to Jesse, and Jesse said she would come on Mormon Stories. We just haven't heard back. So
Nice.
maybe she'll even come on Mormon Stories.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
yeah, so let's go really quickly. Mayci is I'm not going in order, just to go quick, a little faster. But Mayci says she has an active temple recommend. She has a calling. She teaches in primary.
I think we showed her video last time where
Yeah.
she just tells the world, I'm super Mormon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that happens in the show that might not be that Mormon is that she doesn't wear her garments all the time.
Yeah.
And then Whitney as well. I mean, Whitney, the only thing that happens is probably the alcohol in the first episode, the sip of alcohol,
And the swearing.
and the swear.
Did any of y'all think it was weird that she's dropping F-bombs in front of her Mormon mom?
Yeah, I did.
Alyssa, did you ever drop F-bombs in front of your Mormon parents?
Absolutely not.
How about you?
No.
Gerardo, is there an F word in Spanish?
No,
I wouldn't even drop
that
the F
didn't
word
happen.
in front of my non-Mormon mom.
Yeah. So she's just regular every day dropping F-bombs in front of her mom. That's weird. But
I know faithful members, really faithful wives of bishops who
you swear?
swear.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just my experience.
I'm glad she has that comfort level with her mom,
Totally.
that she's not pretending to be something different, but it's very interesting and a juxtaposition to her,
Yeah.
fervor that she's super Mormon.
Yeah.
It was jarring to me.
But also the For Strength of Youth pamphlet has changed. I mean, it was much more specific. Don't say these words. And now the For Strength of Youth pamphlet is remember your body is a temple, but it doesn't specifically say no tattoos. And remember to use uplifting language, but it doesn't give you a list of words not to say. It is more gray. The
Right.
pamphlet that is guiding some of these identity markers, especially for young people, right? The For Strength of Youth pamphlet, you can actually see how that played out in my generation as a millennial versus the younger generation, because their language is a lot more flexible. And so maybe it's a weird thing to us, but I don't think it's a weird thing for young Mormons in general.
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay.
And then we have Layla, who seems to be coming back to church. She's been on and off, but at the end, she's still a believer. And did you say she's
a convert as well, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
16.
Yeah. Since the show has aired, she has a new boyfriend who is active Mormon, who
Yeah.
she said specifically doesn't drink or smoke. So that's pretty Mormon by these standards.
Yeah. Okay.
And then lastly is Michaela, who says that she grew up Mormon, but in California, and very relaxed type Mormon, just as Mayci actually. Anyway, Michaela hasn't been active for 10 years. But she hinted as like, I'm open, you know, she hasn't lost her faith or deconstructed the religion.
Yeah, not everybody who stops attending church deconstructs their belief. So you can be out of the church 10, 15 years, 20 years, but still believe Joseph Smith was a prophet, the Book of Mormon's true. Usually those people just feel a lot of shame. It's like, I'm not living how I should, but I still believe it's true. And that's actually, we call this Jack Mormons in our culture. I don't know, there's a female analog for that term, but anyway,
Sluts.
that might be, what's that?
No, I'm joking.
What'd
It's-
you say?
So typical to not mention Jill Mormons.
All right. So she's in between. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even the sinners are 3 out of 4, you know, still self-identifying as believing Mormons is what we're kind of saying.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay. That's worth it. All right. So we pulled together some clips from a YouTube channel called Saints Unscripted. Gerardo, do you want to tell us why we are including these?
I think it represents overall how Mormons are feeling about this show. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of play him and just respond to it.
Okay. So what should we look for in this first clip?
Honestly, Julia helped us gather the clips. I just sent I didn't have time to get. So
that's fine. That's
we'll
fine.
kind of be reacting live to it.
Okay, so we'll call this one's entitled "Why Call Them Mormon Wives." So we'll tune in and see what's interesting.
So are we calling this
And
a
also,
clickbait
why are they
type
claiming
headline?
Mormon?
Yeah.
Like,
Because
is it to draw people in, or is it because they legitly are like, yeah, we're Mormon and we live that life?
Well,
but
what would
they
the alternate
don't.
title be? The
It's very
Secret
evident.
Life of Daybreak Housewives. It's either that, but I think Mormon is just a little bit more.
because
Daybreak. I love that you're calling out Daybreak.
Isn't that?
I don't know. I thought they were in Draper.
Oh, sorry, Daybreak.
Sorry, we're getting to
My
Utah.
parents live there.
We're
I
getting
love
to
that
Utah.
place.
No, but if it said Daybreak Housewives, people would be like,
There's appeal to
True.
people who
Yeah.
aren't Mormon by saying Mormon.
Dude,
And
people
probably
love the
who are.
Mormon
They do.
stuff.
and not love like, not that.
Love like,
like this is crazy.
All right, I got reactions, but I want to hear y'all's first. Anyone have strong reactions to that? Like she almost had contempt. The bald one, I don't know her name. I apologize, I don't know their names, but I don't watch this show, and I just saw these clips right before. The bald woman, she seemed to have contempt for the use of the word Mormon. And for those who don't know, for like 150 plus years, basically, the church embraced and used the title Mormon. And it's just in the past few years that the current Mormon prophet overturned that long history and all of a sudden said the term Mormon as an identity marker shouldn't be used. And so it's really weird that just in a couple years, this younger generation has contempt for a label that all of us happily used, that the church invested in that identity in the I'm a Mormon campaign for billions of dollars for over 150 years. And now all of a sudden it's almost like spit's coming out of her mouth as she's enraged about the fact that anyone would dare refer to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as Mormon. Did that seem weird to y'all?
Are they not just annoyed that they're identifying as Mormon when, they're so disobedient to the standards? I wasn't
I
sure
think
whether
that's-
it was
I think they were going back and forth.
okay.
But yeah, it was kind of interesting.
Well, that is a thing, right? That Mormons all the time.
Yeah.
It's like you shouldn't call your podcast Mormon Stories. That's misrepresentation, And I'm like, what am I going to call it? Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Stories? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Get that SEO.
Yeah, exactly.
To
Anyway.
be fair though, to be fair, I think it is natural when they're like in the media right now, these Mormon shows, Mormon murder shows, Mormon true crime shows, and then you got the Daybells, then you got this show, that I think it's a natural reaction to say this representation in the media of all of some of the stuff that's going on in Mormonism that's more salacious doesn't represent my experience as just a stay-at-home mom who goes to church once a week, and these are my people and these are my beliefs. So I kind of understand that reaction in the context of all of the negative press in the media surrounding Mormonism, which which often they deserve, it's like the $1 billion. But when you take all of those news stories together, of course, they're going to say that just doesn't represent my experience as a Mormon. And so I do understand that. But to Alyssa's point, like, if they're not Mormon, what are they? They're not anything else. And if you want to call the show Utah Wives, as if Utah culture and Mormon culture are somehow like, able to separate, they're one and the same. Like, if only on the inside do we care, the gatekeeping of how Mormon are they. But from the outside, like the soda and the hair and the language that they use, even the ones who are out are still highly affected. Their brains are still Mormon brains. Like, I still understand them in the context of Mormonism. And so what else are they? What else are they other than Mormon?
And Hulu would never have done the show if it was just Utah women. I mean, Hulu wouldn't care, right? And all the major plot points are carefully chosen to evolve around Mormon tension, which we're going to get to in just a second. Really quickly, Julia put this slide together that I think we tried to make this point last episode. We just want to make it again visually. The Mormon Church, on the one hand, is proud to claim 17 million, members worldwide. Am I wrong? Y'all?
Oh, they love talking about it.
Don't count anyone.
Yeah. So on the one hand, the church
Even
wants
people that are 100, what? 100, when do they remove your records?
when you're like 110, they'll take you off the rolls. And we're not kidding. So on the one hand, the Mormon Church, LDS Church, wants to claim 17 million members. On the other hand, we just want to remind everybody, roughly 35% of those 17 million are either active in the church and or self-identify as Mormon. And so Julie put this together. The vast majority of members, people baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that the church claims, would not self-identify in this way and would not feel comfortable identifying with the way that these podcasters, want people to sort of meet the criteria then to be able to call themselves Mormon. And so I just think that's an important point.
Yeah,
Britt,
there's not.
so you're right, Britt, but I think you also agree that this is complicated, right?
No, I get that.
I was just
Alyssa,
gonna say there's not 17 million weekly temple goers.
or tithe payers or
exactly. Yeah.
Not even close.
And I bet there are women in that show who are paying full tithing, like obscene amounts of money
Yeah.
to the church. And then for members of their own in-group to be like, they don't really count though. And it's like, well, they're giving 10% of their income to this organization. Does that not count?
Yeah.
That's what Taylor's mom just did a TikTok saying how hurtful it was that she fully claims, this is Taylor's mom, claims I'm an active Mormon. My daughter is a Mormon, and she is essentially just talked to the Mormon community in her most recent TikTok that she was so disappointed that everyone is just saying like, you're not enough and you're not Mormon enough. And it made her ashamed of her own religious community, that people could be so mean and people could be so cruel. So I thought that was actually a vulnerable and honest post that she made, even though she's a problematic character of her own.
Yeah. All right. The next clip we have, and by the way, is this YouTube channel kind of like trying to be the faithful answer to us, basically?
Yeah, it is.
That's kind of fun. These are like our nemesis. What's the word?
But they didn't even watch
alter
it.
egos?
But they didn't even watch it.
They didn't watch?
No, they made a response without watching the show.
Oh, they never watched the actual
that's
show.
happened a lot.
Okay, that's ridiculous.
And they titled it New Mormon Trash TV.
Wow. Can you really call something trash TV if you didn't bother to watch it? Is that problematic?
As someone who watches TV, reality TV, and hates when people dish on it without watching it, it is problematic, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trash can still provide important cultural discourse. So then it's like,
Absolutely.
is it trash? It's
Yeah.
grist for the mill.
It's valuable trash.
Yeah.
I mean, in all seriousness, we addressed this last time, like, or maybe we talked about it after. Like, on the one hand, I'm like, I've been trying to get mainstream global television to talk about so many of these issues for like 20 years. So on the one hand, I'm lamenting, why is it that it takes a reality TV show for us to talk about things like Mormon sexual shame, Mormon gatekeeping, garments, in-group, out-group stuff? Like, sad that it has to be reality TV to bring this to us. On the other hand, yay, reality TV, that it's getting these issues talked about and in mainstream media. So if I wasn't successful, how can I now decry or belittle reality TV for being able to bring to the mainstream what I and others we weren't.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, and it's just a fact that like these giant media companies are gonna be able to have the most reach, but like things like Mormon Stories podcast have been like part of creating that wave.
Yeah.
So it's all
Which I
connected.
also think is why it's important to talk about these shows, whether you think they're trash or not trash. Like there are millions of eyes that are looking at this.
Yeah.
And so whether you like it or not, I think it's necessary for us to be able to say, okay, what messages are these shows trying to send us about Mormonism? What messages are these shows trying to send us about purity culture, about Utah culture, about marriage, about, you know, about young marriage, about divorce, all of these things. And so it doesn't, I mean, the show, you can say, oh, it's vapid or oh, it's funny or whatever, but the actual themes are things that are actually really important. And they're conversations that you might see in like, you know, highbrow media and books and literature and things like that, but that's not going to get nearly as many eyes on it. And so kind of have to use this as the launching off point to have the bigger conversations.
But the reality is that Mormonism is fascinating for an outsider, and I don't think Mormons see it that way. You know, I had a conversation yesterday with a coworker who he grew up in Pennsylvania. He has never, it was his first time in Utah. And he was asking me all these questions about what is this building, because we were in around Temple Square, and I was explaining, well, this is where Mormons do rituals, and not everyone's allowed in. And I told him like and what kind of rituals? I was like, well, weddings happen there. Like I said, my sister got married in December, but I was not allowed to go in.
Right.
And he's like, what? That's crazy. And these things that are like kind of day-to-day experience to Mormons, they think that that's how the world is. And like, oh, we're not that crazy. You know, I mean, again, going back to Hannah Syriac and her responses of like, we're just normal people, like loving Jesus and like doing and following the commandments. But when you really put it into context, into what it means for the real world, to have a place where you do these secret rituals, and then you exclude family members who don't follow all the rules, and you know you believe in golden plates that were delivered by an angel, and a translation of an Egyptian papyri that all Egyptologists say that, you know, it's not a true translation. Like all of this is fascinating to an outsider. So you don't really need, I mean, obviously it's exponential when you combine it with a story like swinging, but
yeah, right. But it is like, yeah, inherently interesting. And kind of like what John asked us last time is, do we still identify as Mormon? And I think immediately following leaving the church, I stopped feeling like I was Mormon. I was like, oh, that's not a part of my identity anymore. And it took moving away from Utah, having friends who had no relationship to Mormonism at all, and then them just being so fascinated by like Mormon culture, for me to realize, oh yeah, no, I definitely am still very Mormon. I'm still very entrenched in this. It doesn't really matter whether I practice or believe it at all, because I went through the temple. I did, you know, all the secret handshakes. Like that is wild to a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't remember if I read this list off the air or at the end of last episode, but I'm just going to read it again. These are the topics, just a small subsample of the topics that I've been trying to cover on Mormon Stories for 20 years, that this show, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, is covering. All right. Law of chastity, which is sexual morality and purity, purity culture, sexual shame, sex being a sin next to murder, which is scriptural, inorgasmia, sexual dysfunction, masturbation, pornography use, infidelity, patriarchy, feminism, early marriage and motherhood, conditional and unconditional family love and relationships, controlling and judgmental parents, word of wisdom, drinking, alcohol, drug use, etc., shame-based gossip, perfectionism, plastic surgery, expectations of women appearance and body, etc., racism, boundary policing, in-group, out-group, gossip, queen bee dynamics, religious hypocrisy. And that's just a list I came up with just off the top of my head. And you could just go back and see entire multi-hour Mormon Stories podcast episodes trying to cover these topics. So again, I'm only just trying to make the point that this show, any of you Mormon or ex-Mormon who hate the fact that it's reality TV, that's getting the spotlight around Mormonism and ex-Mormonism, you should also thank your lucky stars that this show is able to do what none of you and none of us have been able to do so far. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I also feel like there's a degree of sexism in some people's just like instant disgust with reality TV, because like typically women enjoy reality TV and enjoy watching like emotional drama play out.
Yeah.
Just something.
Yeah, for sure. It's like look down your nose at.
Yeah, like I saw people in
Yeah.
your comment section saying you were delegitimizing yourself as a podcast,
Right.
and I'm like, this is it's the number one show on
Yeah,
Hulu. It's
yeah,
about the topic of your podcast.
It's
That's
on the
insane
Hulu
to say that you
homepage
shouldn't
for
cover
like
it.
a week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to cover
Like
it.
you're delegitimizing yourself by lowering
It's too
yourself to
lowbrow.
reality
It's
TV.
too lowbrow
like,
for
it's
Mormon stories.
going to be culturally important regardless.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. Yeah.
I have really strong opinions about how important I think this show is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, just a summary, like imagine just your regular teenage girl who watches the show and see these women who are business owners, who, you know, are the main breadwinners of their homes, who are pushing against the boundaries of patriarchy and pushing it against things that may not be necessarily commandments, but they can see that, you know, there's a problem with Mormon culture that can be solved by pushing these boundaries. I think is really important. But
Yeah. All right, let's go to the second video clip from this Faithful Mormon YouTube channel of Faithful Mormons who didn't bother to watch the show, but have very strong opinions about it. The title is Seeing Mormon as a Culture. Can people claim a Mormon identity from a cultural lens or even an ethnic lens if they're not true believing or TBM Mormons?
Okay, do you think that even if someone has left the church, but maybe not in a way that they are like super mad at it and they want to fight it, they just like decide that their life is going a different direction and they step that way? For those people, do you think that they can still identify as Mormon, as members of
Would
the
we
church?
gatekeep them? Would we?
Well, yeah, I don't know.
That's a good question.
And maybe they use the term Mormon in that sense because they're not going to say, hey, I'm a member of the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints, because at that point they're not anymore. But to say Mormon, is Mormon more of like a cultural?
Yeah, I feel like they're
We
talking
are.
about it more as like when they say, yeah, I've met a lot of people, or I met a lot of people on my mission who would say, yeah, I used to be Mormon. Like they use that term to just kind of associate with how they grew up and like, so I just kind of assume when someone's like, yeah, I used to be Mormon or I grew up Mormon, that they're usually just not anymore. They don't really claim it anymore. But it
Interesting.
seems
Maybe
like
the word Mormon has evolved into the cultural identity of being raised in Utah and things like that, or outside of Utah as well, but being a member of the church, being raised that way.
Yeah, which is why I think it's really wise that President Nelson had us associate, change our name. I mean, not change our name, but refer to ourselves as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because you can see a distinction when people use the term Mormon versus like the Church of Jesus Christ.
What do you guys think? Well, okay, Gerardo, you're laughing. Why?
no, you go.
No, you're laughing. Come on.
Well,
What's
I just
funny?
thought it was funny, you know, that say, oh, maybe Russell Nelson was just had this vision of people in the future identifying as Mormon as a cultural term. So now we need a way to identify the true believers. And so we're going to change our name to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah, like he didn't get a vision about trans rights, or he didn't get a vision about like a flood or, political turmoil. He got a vision about like the nickname of the church and like how we need to stop using that. But I was just curious about the idea of that being smart. Do we all agree that it was smart for the church to abandon the title Mormon?
I think
No.
so. For me, when I listened to that, if Russell M. Nelson and the PR team around him was watching that clip where someone said, "I'm so glad that the prophet differentiated how Mormonism is seen kind of in the media compared to like what we want to be," I think that they would all pat each other on the backs that we did what we wanted to do, which was at the time separate what we're doing from other things going on in the media, specifically at the time in the conversation around Warren Jeffs. And so if that's what believing members feel like is happening, that I don't associate with all this Warren Jeffs and, this Hulu show and the Chad Daybell, I'm doing this thing over here as the member of a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If they feel like that's what's happening, then I think that that's what the prophet and PR team wanted to happen. And so I think that's what they wanted to do because of how Mormons looked in the media, especially during the time of Warren Jeffs.
I feel like it's mostly useful for self-soothing among members because people outside of the church haven't really. I mean, some journalists have got the memo that they're not supposed to say Mormon anymore, but it's pretty hard to get away from the term Mormon for outsiders when the alternative is ludicrous.
For
does seem
sure.
like-
But for like the insiders, like for
Yeah.
her, a believing Mormon, to say that she like is like sees the distinction and she's over here than it
Mhm.
did for the in group, I think what the PR team and or prophet wanted it to do.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think the change is almost exclusively within the in group. And maybe to your point, Britt, I do think there is a way that it can be, valid as far as like distinguishing between like Warren Jeffs, FLDS, and the more mainstream church. But it seems like there's definitely a lot of way that people are using it as virtue signaling, like, oh, I'm more a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints than you. But even in the Secret Lives show, Whitney says that she's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints about 100 times. So a lot of the other women like to say Mormon, but you even see there in this show, it's kind of like comes across like this sense of piousness. And I think culturally, that's really how it feels, is this, this like tiered pious attitude that does happen in the show. They try to make a distinction that we're not Mormons. I mean, some of them do, but yeah, Whitney specifies we like to be referred to as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So
Really quickly, my understanding of what happened is they did some brand evaluations. Like literally they hired Madison Avenue types and just said, how's the Mormon brand doing? And everybody outside of the church, basically the most common reactions that came up to the Mormon brand, it was like either Amish or polygamists or like bigots or racists. And that was kind of the Mormon brand. And of course, there was a little bit of like missionaries or like nice families or the Osmonds. But my understanding is the feedback was overwhelmingly negative. And so my understanding is Russell M. Nelson, number one, wanted to shed a negative brand and do a rebrand.
Which he'd hated for decades. Like
Which he
before
had
they
hated
even probably
anyway,
did any of that research.
for sure.
It's just been his pet thing no matter what.
So it was a pet thing. The brand was damaged. Everybody knew it. The Book of Mormon musical was coming out, making the church look ridiculous. And I think it just in sincerity, Nelson probably wanted the church to be more Jesus Christ focused. So if you always have to say Latter-day Saint or member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or the Church of Jesus Christ, then you're naturally running from a damaged brand and then trying to emphasize what's more important to the church, which is Jesus Christ. The problem is you're abandoning how the rest of the world thinks of you and what they call you and how they know you. And you're also abandoning a short, easy to remember term that the church spent billions of dollars investing in, not to mention all the search engine optimization benefits that they had by owning Mormon.org and by owning all the SEO around the term Mormon. Now, I will say another reason they ran from the term Mormon is because podcasts like Mormon Stories and Mormon Matters and Mormon Think, the website, and Mormon Expression
and Mormon
Discussion, they were dominating at least the podcast realm, a lot of the web space, and the church was just losing the SEO battle. But anyway, these are some of the insider things.
Yeah.
And what do we think when Nelson dies? Does Oaks or a subsequent prophet allow the term to become associated with us again, or does Oaks and others perpetuate this this condemnation of the term? Anyone?
I could see
have a
them
guess?
easing up on it.
Go ahead.
Britt?
I'll go at that question. For me, when I watch these things historically, to Alyssa's point, that sometimes, we have a rebranding or a renaming in order to kind of judge piety and, when you really need to up the markers to see who's in and out. So if Mormonism becomes this kind of fuzzy thing where it's Utah culture and it includes FLDS and it includes preppers and the day bells, if the boundaries start to get really fuzzy within the community, there's then a demand to, can we have some different words or markers here to see who's in my group? And so, that identity marker became, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Oh, okay. Then that means you're not any of these other things, right? And so, like Sam is saying, maybe when, and then these things loosen up over time, and then it gets too fuzzy again, and then there'll be another new thing. And it just kind of ebbs and flows. It goes in and out based on what's going on with the community at the time. So if Mormonism in the future, especially as the faith crisis wave calms down, if they kind of stop circling the wagons and being so defensive and having to really up the identity markers, when that calms down, then I think you'll see the term Mormon come back. I think you'll see a lot of things come back until it gets messy again, and then they'll pull back the reins again. And you can see this, across Mormon history.
Yeah, I just think for the most part, I think Nelson gets an F in successfully convincing the world to refer to us as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Even like
isn't
Peggy
part of it
Stack at the Salt Lake Tribune didn't rename her podcast Mormon Land to Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Land, and she's like a temple recommend holding faithful Mormon, like in every way. But it's just journalists alone are just not going to use. They're not going to stop using the term Mormon.
Part of that is also the hypocrisy, though, because when you call gay people who want to be referred to as gay and you call them, no, we're going to call you people with same-sex attraction, but then you have a preferred name that you want the world to call you, I think everybody called bullshit on that. Like, you don't get to have your preferred essentially pronoun or your preferred name, your preferred identity, and then kind of language police other people's preferred identities. And I think people were really quick to catch on that hypocrisy, especially the gay community.
Yeah.
I love how in that podcast clip they were like, we can't gatekeep, right? Like, but maybe
they thought about it. Yeah. Yeah.
We'd love to.
I do feel like the timing of this, where it's just like a few years after they've tried to, tighten the reins on what they call the church. And also this idea of trying to be less culty, less weird, more normal, more mainstream. But the church is still like in this like push and pull with that identity right now and that struggle. And so we see this show, these women who are saying exactly what Nelson has been trying to say, right? They're saying, we love Jesus, we love God, we're Christian, we're a part of this church. Like, it's not weird, it's totally normal. We're like these fun, attractive women that are, totally not weird. And the response from Mormons, I think, would kind of go against, the church made their statement, and yes, they are drinking. So it's not that they're doing things perfectly aligned with the church, but their mentality that they're coming at this with, it's okay to be a little bit different. We just are trying to follow God. We're just, more mainstream, I think is really aligns with what Nelson has been trying to promote. And so the fact that it has, that their identity has been so intensely scrutinized, I think just kind of shows that even for Mormons, for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they are still like not fully buying into that idea that they are mainstream, that they are just Christian, that that's good enough. They're like, well, no, it's actually still not good enough because you're not doing X, Y, Z.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump to the final clip we have from Saints Unscripted. And this one is all about, it's entitled Representing the Faith. And I haven't heard this yet either. So I'm hearing this for the first time, like a lot of us.
Even like when I follow like Taylor Frankie Paul's account, they posted that it was a couple weeks ago. They posted that they did church at home. Like, get ready with us to do church at home. And they have done ones where they've gone to church, but they just did church at home that day for whatever reason. And they had activity books for their kids that had primary stuff, and they showed them saying a prayer and whatnot. But also in the morning, it showed that they made iced coffee to prepare for church at home. And they're like, yeah, we're Mormons that drink coffee. Like, what of it? And then a lot of people in the comments were like, oh my gosh, I'm like this too. Like, there are just certain, like, I love the church, but I also like I also drink coffee and I also do this. And you totally don't need to go to church to have like a fulfilling church experience and blah, blah, blah. So there's definitely a group. There's definitely an audience who relates to these people. And
I have a thought.
it's interesting.
So is it okay for people to be on a spectrum of faith? I think yes, right? But is it okay for the people that are on wide ends of this spectrum to be representing to people who don't know of the church, the wives in that church? And I think that's what's harmful to.
Interesting. Thoughts on that?
They kind of seem to have this bias that they're the reasonable middle, because she said it's not right for people on either ends of the spectrum. But I would say that it seems like these people want, the pretty much the highest end of the spectrum to be the representation for the church.
Yeah. Are like Orthodox paid apologists for the Mormon church, do they represent the mainstream? Do they? Like these people, are these people the mainstream?
Like which one? I mean, Kwaku, who doesn't wear his garments and is proud of it.
Yeah. Or Cardin, who, uses medical cannabis and is happy that he gets to break the rules because he has a medical cannabis card. Like who gets to be a mainstream, especially, like we just showed this slide already.
Yeah.
They are on the extreme ends, these apologists. Am I wrong?
That's how it comes across.
Yeah.
But it is, I don't know. I think the main thing that I was really taking from that is, and I don't have an answer, it's just more like an observation. Just what does representation mean? In this context, I think we a lot of the time think like who's representing the church is the missionaries that are going out, and they're the ones that say we're representing God. That's like what we're assigned to do. These women didn't sign up to be like the token Mormons for the world to see. They didn't have any part in what the show is called. They are Mormon. Mormonism is a big factor of their life. And they say that, but it is really interesting that like, that the perception is that they're not representing Mormonism well. And why is it necessarily their job to represent Mormonism in any particular way? Because they're on a Hulu show? I don't know. They are Mormon, but I don't think anybody is watching this saying, that is what every Mormon looks like. Like they're on a reality TV show. That seems kind of obvious that most people would assume that they're not you see Housewives of Miami. You don't think that's what every
housewife in Miami.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even then they have the problem as like, how do you pick? Like, let's say that they get their dream, right? Like, and they get a show. We're going to represent what Hannah Syriac envisions as the epitome of a Mormon wife. Where are you going to find it? Is it the one that has a calling, the one that rejected a calling? Is it, how do you pick?
And if you showed the representation they think that they want, the world is going to be even more disturbed by it. Like there's no winning here.
I mean, the trad wife phenomenon isn't coming out too well, right?
Which I think is part of what is kind of sad about the reaction to the show, I think, as opposed to like what they expected. I'm just thinking of like Jen specifically, who has been, I think, kind of saying like, we want to give, we really want to show the church in a positive light. She's the one that's the most Mormon, but nobody's talking about how she's putting the church in a positive light. Nobody's really talking about how empowered these women are. They're talking about how they're in these really unhealthy relationships.
A toxic marriage, right?
Right, exactly. And I think like, even when they're going into it, and they said, I'm thinking of Jen and maybe it was Mayci, who said specifically that they were a little bit tentative about, they didn't know what the name of the show was going to be. They were nervous about wearing like the blue trench coats in front of the temple. They were worried about what message the show editing team was going to like, how they're going to make that look, because they didn't want the church to look bad. Yeah. They were proud of the church. And even with that, it's not the editing, it's not the temple and the music that I think is why people are so shocked. I think that's why Mormons are appalled, because we have the Sam Smith getting down in front of the Mormon temple, but it's the content of the relationships mostly that have people questioning Mormon culture.
Yeah. And that's a problem when you really get into the nitty gritty of what I mean, when you're trying to decide who is the one representing Mormonism. Well, again, is it the bishop that accepts his Mormon, who's gay kid who's married to another man, or is it the one that shuns them or kicks them out of the house?
Yeah. I loved it that they started that clip by going, "It's okay to have a belief spectrum, right? That's okay for the people to have."
I heard you
Make
laughing
it
on that
illegal
one.
to be a bad Mormon, should we?
But at the same time, like before, just 15 years ago, there was no such thing in Mormonism as the idea of a progressive Mormon or a liberal Mormon or a New Order Mormon or any of that. You were either like faithful in the church or you were like ex-Mormon or Jack Mormon. So this idea of many ways to Mormon or shades of belief or unorthodox versus orthodox, that's a brand new, like Mormonism's a relatively young religion. And this idea of orthodoxy, unorthodoxy, literally most Mormons have never heard the term orthodox or unorthodox in their own context. So I guess I'm going to forgive these apologists for like looking silly and acting confused about there being a spectrum of Mormon belief and orthodoxy and orthopraxy, but it's because this is new to almost everybody except for podcasts and channels that have been trying to create a bigger tent, for the past 15, 20 years. And honestly, I think they have podcasts and YouTube channels and TikTok channels to thank for the expanding umbrella, to be honest. All right.
Can I add one more thing here,
please,
John?
Britt, yeah.
For me, that clip really highlights the interesting dynamic between the culture and what's said on the pulpit, because they affect one another, right? What's happening in the culture can show up in the pulpit. What's said on the pulpit affects the culture. But what's interesting when I like to watch the community is see what messages are accepted by the culture from the pulpit. And then sometimes the culture just says no. Like when COVID hit and President Nelson said, kind of go get vaccinated, the culture essentially said, no, you're speaking as a man now. And when it comes to coffee, I mean, we have recent talks saying that 1 cup of coffee kept that mother from her temple, blessings, and exaltation. I mean, in general conference, talking about the damage done to your spirituality with 1 cup of coffee. And essentially the culture, especially young culture, looks at that and says no, like we drink coffee and we're Mormon. Like they essentially as a generation, as a culture, say no and don't accept it. So it's interesting what things the culture will just ignore from the pulpit because they just say no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got another clip here. This is Liann May. I believe this is Taylor's mom.
Yeah.
Does someone want to tell us what we're about to watch here?
Yeah.
Should we run it?
Yeah, let's run it.
Let's run it. And okay, so this is Taylor's mom.
Yeah, this is the video that Britt was mentioning.
Yeah.
Oh,
A
cool.
few minutes ago.
Okay, cool. I don't think I've seen this, so I'm excited to watch it. So let's hear from Taylor's faithful mom really quick.
I'm sure you have heard a lot about the secret lives of Mormon wives. I know I have. My daughter Taylor's in the show. But what really makes me irritated recently is that I see all the backlash from them, their comments that they receive on social media. I don't know if their families get it as well as we do, but I recently received one that I thought was very interesting and contradicting, that they stated that we, my family and I, should distance ourselves from being with the church and being Mormon because we're not Mormon enough. And that's pretty hypocritical, coming and saying that on somebody's page and stating other things like these don't align with the teachings. Well, either does that. For somebody to come and say that I shouldn't be a member of the church because I'm not Mormon enough or I sin. Let me tell you, a lot of things happen in the church and a lot of sins are committed every single day and nobody is perfect. So before somebody should go out and judge somebody else or state that they shouldn't be Mormon or they're not active enough and all the other stuff that comes with it, maybe they should look within themselves and see if they're doing the things that align with the church.
I mean, that's a mic drop, right? Like for so long, I get that on Mormon Stories. It's like, oh, you like LGBT people, or you advocate for women, or you don't like what the prophet said. Just leave the church. You can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. Would Jesus be saying, oh, you're not living up to quite all the standards, so get the heck out of my church?
That's
Right?
like when people tell me to go home to England because I don't like guns.
Yeah. Other comments? I love that
I'm-
point from Liann. Britt?
Yeah, for me, like I'm mixed on her because I loved that post that she did. I loved how she called out the ugliness of the Mormon community and how they are acting on social media and attacking her family. I thought that clip was great, and so I want to love her more. But then we have to talk about, and we probably will sometime today, about her, being at the table with Taylor and telling Taylor how awful Dakota is, and then in the same breath pushing her to get married because she's pregnant. And so it's like, oh, I want to love you because I loved that TikTok. And also, you're a little bit that scene was really hard to watch.
But at the end, she's right. She is being Mormon, right? By telling Taylor, go marry that guy.
Yeah.
So I would be
What's
even
more
more upset if I
Mormon than
was her.
saying, yeah, like you really screwed up. This guy is awful. And when's the wedding? Like, what is more Mormon than that?
But also, you really telling Taylor you really goofed up. You need to stop stop embarrassing the family. Don't shack up and live with someone out of wedlock. Like, she was a little bit shaming, a lot of bit shaming, to
which is
Taylor,
Mormon.
which is very
Mormon, literally. That's
And
why
Taylor-
the controversy behind all of this, because they're questioning like the shame that it's all running on.
And I think everyone's heart broke when Taylor said, I just don't deserve a happy ending. And we saw how the shame affects her. And we saw how the shame affects the kinds of partners that she picks and the behavior that she's allowed. And she just says, like, I don't deserve a happy ending. And I think just like all of our hearts broke for her.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right. Well, we've done some meta-analysis. Now it's time to dive in just to the good stuff on episodes 3 to 5. That's what we're covering today. So episode 3 begins with let's just, it frames this kind of saint versus sinner dynamic, even though we've kind of debunked that. They're pretty much all saints and all sinners. I mean, with the exception of Jessie, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's just pure sinner. Apparently.
Please come on Mormon Stories podcast.
In all the best ways, she's pure sinner, pure exmo. It's nice to have exmo representation.
That's nice.
I mean, since there are more of us than faithful devout
And an
Mormons.
exmo that can be friends with a ton of believing members and not tell them about Joseph Smith as a sexual predator.
Brave.
They just
couple.
come saying that.
But I'm like, she deserves some funner friends to go to Vegas with because I felt bad for her.
For ex-Mormon representation, though, like we could not be happier that like the ones who seem to be in the best marriages, the ones that you would most want to be friends with, like ex-Mormon representation, I feel like none of them were the villains. So I'm happy with that. I think we're represented well.
I'm just going to say, Whitney, I'm not so sure that you identifying as a believing Mormon is having the impact
not helping
on the
anybody.
image of the Mormon church that you think it is. You may consider wanting to, as a favor to the church, self-identify as one of the sinners. Really,
ruthless, John.
I know. Cut that, make that a short. I she'll probably do a dance to it as she replays
with the sound. Whitney, do it.
Anyway, okay, so let's just start off with that whole dynamic. Obviously, there's Jen's baby blessing, right? And clearly, it starts out with that jacuzzi scene where I guess that's Zach's graduation from BYU. Are they at Zach's house?
Zach's parents' house.
Zach's parents' house. And, they get in the jacuzzi and then someone pulls out the flask and they start drinking alcohol. And apparently Zach and Jen are bent out of shape about the fact that anyone would drink alcohol in their presence in a sacred Mormon home. And so as a consequence, Zach and Jen decide to disinvite 4 of the wives from their baby shower, from their baby blessing, which usually is held, by the way, in a Mormon sacrament meeting in a Mormon temple, or sorry, in a Mormon chapel. So I thought that was kind of fringy. They didn't record that during COVID, right? So was that a little bit weird for you guys to see the baby blessing happening in their house instead of in a chapel?
I think rich people would do that sometimes. I've seen that before. I've been to one, I think.
No,
I think there's been a shift since COVID. Go ahead,
I think
Alyssa.
COVID kind of changed so that it happens sometimes.
Okay.
Still less.
All right.
But-
Well, I guess
but
I'm showing my
sometimes.
age as someone where baby blessings were normally held in
And I
Or
think
chapel.
your
they still are
inactivity in the
normally.
church.
What?
You're showing your inactivity in the church.
Well, I was excommunicated.
What?
Well, I'm saying when I was faithful, that's when I was faithful. So anyway, so they're doing it in the house, but anyway, they decide to disinvite 4 of them from this sacred ordinance.
To make sure it's clear, though, you said that Zach and Jen decided to disinvite.
Oh, right.
But Zach
Yeah, help me.
decided to disinvite. Jen was just the messenger.
Yeah.
of
Oh,
her
there's so much to
husband.
unpack.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's hit from the beginning. This idea of less faithful Mormons being disinvited from things like baptisms, baby blessings, temple marriages. Is that a thing or not a thing? What is your experience?
So Mormon.
Is it?
So
Is it?
Mormon.
I feel like they normally try and use them as like missionary opportunities, though.
It depends on
okay,
how
so-
they're.
So what's
seen.
your experience, Gerardo?
Well, we just had one. We
You want to tell us?
yeah, like my husband's side of the family, it was pretty bad, because I don't know how much to tell, but basically Zach's parents and siblings, they all live in Idaho Falls, so they don't live here in Utah.
Wait, maybe clarify that it's a different Zach.
Oh yeah, my Zach.
So Gerardo's married to a Zach. Check out his episode
Yeah.
on Mormon Stories.
And anyway, so he so one of his closest cousins, when he was a believer and not married to a man, was gonna have her baby blessing. So she invites Zach's mom and siblings to the baby blessing, and Zach never finds out that his mom is coming to Utah and that she's gonna be here.
And Zach lives here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And until we're driving to the neighborhood where the cousin lives, because we were going to go do some shopping on Sunday. And then he gets a text message from his mom and says, "Oh, we're all here for the baby blessing of your cousin. We forgot to tell you. We're having kind of lunch after the baby blessing. You can come, but you're probably busy."
Yeah. Okay.
But you're probably
And-
busy.
And that was devastating to him, to the point where like he doesn't talk to those cousins anymore, because
So Zach was hurt by that.
yeah, really hurt that that the cousins invited his parents to come and travel to Utah.
From Idaho.
Yeah, and basically made an arrangement with his mom of, don't tell Zach that you're going to be here until after the baby blessing, because he's not invited.
Because they didn't want you and him showing up.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he later came out because they were scared that I was going to be there. But yeah.
Britt, do you have any story? And I'm so sorry that happened, Gerardo and Zach. I'm so sorry. Britt, do you have any stories like that?
Yeah, and I think it goes down to how dangerous you are as an ex-Mormon. So,
Right.
and I think this is really done on the subconscious level. But if you, as an ex-Mormon, there's something about you to the believing member. And I think that most of this is subconscious, that there's something that you know, and there's things that you're doing that would totally destroy my worldview and my identity and my belonging. And so the most natural thing to do is put a boundary. And people do that without being aware of it and why they're doing it. It's just the most natural thing for an ego to do. And so I think your ability to be invited in those spaces on a Mormon spectrum really depends on how many red flags of I'm dangerous you're putting out there. And so, maybe if you're gay or you're come on Mormon Stories like I do, or you do other things, then you tend to maybe not get invited to those spaces. But if you're very quietly post-Mormon and very supportive and just a part of the family, this is just a family ritual, and you don't make a big fuss about things, then maybe there can be a lowered kind of danger response from your family and community where you may get invited to those things. But I tend to not be invited to those things. Yeah.
Okay, so Britt, you've been excluded from those things too.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, so is it okay if really quick, Alyssa, have you ever been?
Yeah, I have been excluded from these things as well.
Like any examples? Well, you don't have to name names or people.
Oh yeah, baby blessings, weddings. There have been a couple things.
Okay, all right. So Britt, is it okay if I push back a little bit?
Sure, please.
So just as an example, so like Margie and I, again, we live in Salt Lake City, and even when Mormon Stories was going, but we were still in the church, but doing Mormon Stories, we would still get invited to baby blessings, to baptisms, to temple farewells, to missionary farewells, and to missionary homecomings. At some point, we started getting uninvited, and we have family that lives like within a mile of where we live, and they would do baby's blessings and farewells, again, just like Gerardo, just like Zach, and just totally not invite us. And by the way, these events aren't just the baby blessing or the farewell or the baptism. They all have food. They all go back to the house. It's just a legit family reunion. Oftentimes people come from out of town. So it's really hurtful when like in Zach and Gerardo's case, everyone's coming from out of town. It might be the one time a year that everybody actually gets together, and then you're not invited. So I don't mean to be a crybaby here, but like, this is hurtful. But
don't you think that it shifted though post faith crisis wave? Because when I think about my experience as like I lost my faith now almost 15 years ago, so like kind of before the internet wave, and I did have more flexibility to move around. I even taught seminary and was like very nuanced, didn't believe a lot of things, and I was still a paid seminary teacher kind of before the CES letter and before kind of that wave. And I think since the wave of faith crisis within Mormonism, the danger sense is just so heightened. And so if you make any movement that you're a part of that faith crisis crowd, I think it's much more scary now than it was 15 years ago. We're just like, oh, this weirdo just kind of like doesn't believe in the book of Abraham because of some weird things I never heard of. And that just wasn't as dangerous 15 years ago as it is kind of now, where there was such a pressure on the Mormon church because of the faith crisis wave. For sure,
Britt. I do agree that it's probably gotten more and more scary for believing Mormons to have close relationships with and invite non-believing or ex-Mormon family members to these events. But the thing I wanted to push back on is that it's only ex-Mormon YouTubers and ex-Mormon podcasters that are being excluded. I was literally last week visiting some of our closest friends. They live in Utah County. They're not public about, they're leaving the church. They're not offensive to their family members. They're very kind, subtle, non-offensive members who have left the church. And they were telling me in a heartbroken way that one of their favorite nieces came to Utah from out of state to go into the MTC, the Mission Training Center, for her mission, that there was a huge family get together, again, where people are coming from all over. And this particular friend of mine had a very close relationship as an aunt to this niece, but she wasn't even told that the niece was coming to Utah and about to go into the MTC for a year and a half, and that all the family was getting together. And she wasn't even told that the niece was coming to Utah or was about to enter the MTC or that there was a family reunion. And so all I'm saying is this is real. I'm super glad they caught it. This is a very heartbreaking dynamic that is pervasive in Mormon culture. And it makes me really happy that real, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives covered it. That's all. So anything else we want to say about that whole dynamic? Oh, let's talk about now the fact that it's Zach who, is really behind this exclusion, but then how it, there's that conversation where people are calling Jen and Zach and confronting them about being excluded, and then how Jen kind of takes the bullet. Does anyone want to talk about that?
The exact same situation happened on our case.
Oh, well, let's review it and then talk about how it applies. So what happens with the dynamic between Jen and Zach? One of the women want to recount that?
Jen invites everybody, and she says, I'd love to have you all. And she clarifies that I know that they weren't all really close necessarily before.
I don't think Jen knew anybody.
But she did know Jesse. Her
Okay,
and
just
Jesse
one.
were really close. And Jesse is the resident ex-Mormon.
Right.
And Jesse has made clear, she did on Girls Camp podcast, that she was trying to be a non-anti-Mormon. She was trying to be, a nice ex-Mormon. But yeah, so basically she invites everybody. Zach is really offended by, I think the fact that they had the flask in the hot tub was definitely part of it, but just in general, he said that he didn't feel like they were as good at, what did he say exactly? Like as good at keeping their covenants as you, or as faithful as you, talking to his wife, trying to basically prop up his wife and then tell her that, and also none of your friends are invited. And it sounded like they'd had a discussion back and forth, and he was like, no, this is pretty much final. Like you need to uninvite them. And so she came at it saying, we as both of us think it's best, and we just really want to be there for just our baby. We're trying to keep it more intimate. And then later she revealed that she was like pretty sad about it, and that she wanted to invite them, but that he was really passionate about it. And anyway, that was kind of how that went down.
I feel like it was a perfect display of that graphic that we got, where it's like an umbrella with God, and then there's like the man, and then the wife and the children, and it was like a perfect display of that kind of patriarchal order.
Yeah, but it was also conflicting because, there's this point where Jen's basically saying this is kind of what Zach wanted, and Zach's basically saying it's not that we don't want to exclude you, it's more that it's about the kid, it's about our son, and we just want it to be a good positive energy. So it's not that we're excluding you, right? Wasn't there some gaslighting there? Or am I misreading that?
How about having all the cameramen from Hulu?
Yeah.
Who are probably not members of the church, which Temple recommends, but they can be there.
That's the thing. I'm like, if he just didn't, his wife's doing this reality show and he doesn't want it to encroach on, the sacred parts of their lives, fine. But yeah, they still filmed. So
that's so true. Everybody else in the universe can watch it, but not you.
Yeah. And Mom Talk is
so
paying for his med school because he gambled away his med school money.
That's
So
so gross.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but wasn't Zach gaslighting them?
Yeah.
Trying to say, hey, it's not that we want to exclude you. We just want to make it about the son. What?
We just don't want to include you.
Yeah, exactly.
We just want you not there.
Yeah.
Which I also just feel like that the way that was presented too felt so Mormon, as far as him trying to spin it as a positive, because he was trying to compliment Jen throughout that, you're just such a good mom, and we just love our baby so much. We just think you guys are just really bad people. It just felt like this really weird sugarcoating and
how much was it about control rather than actually
absolutely
thinking?
Because I think that's part of it too. I don't know. Jen probably has other friends and things like that too. And this is kind of I'm not saying this is exactly what's happening. I'm just saying how it was presented in the show is it looked like he's isolating her friends from this really important event, and hopefully there were other friends and family there, and she had people there to support her. So I'm not saying that with my full chest that that's exactly what happened, but the optics, the more we learn about Zach later on, kind of seeing those limits of he's now making decisions on who she can and can't hang out with. That's a pattern that is not healthy. And unfortunately, a lot of Zach's behavior that we see on the show, especially later, is kind of goes along that unhealthy line. And I think that's just a little example of especially where she's the one that's kind of taking the bullet for it, and at first at least is pretending like it's a dual decision, and is kind of and meshing her identity into his, saying that we chose it together, which I also think is a very, very Mormon thing to do and is expected within Mormonism to, you know, give up your own personal identity for the sake of your partner, to be able to be like, we move as a team, which I think is good. Like inherently you want to be able to have, you want to be a team with your spouse or your partner. Like that's a good thing. But we just see the way that that can be going to these extremes where now she's like kind of like losing herself in him. And again, I'm not saying this was a really dramatic incident, but I'm just saying we're kind of seeing these inklings early on that become more exacerbated as the series goes on. That is hard to watch.
And Jen admits that
Yeah.
Zach has an issue when she became the main breadwinner of the home, of, you know, trying to become kind of like second in command, because now how do I balance this? Like she is the one making all the income, and I can't make all the decisions anymore. And you can see that I mean, in my opinion, he's taking back control through little things like this.
He handles it by throwing a little tantrum and saying, "I
Mhm.
don't care about your mom talk." And it's like,
Yes,
oh,
exactly.
that was so hurtful. Like
Mhm.
that was so painful. But I think you're so right. Seeing that moment, I think us Mormon women resonated with the way that we probably subconsciously did this in our own marriages, because we were set up from the time we were small children to defer to our father, to defer to our bishop. I have yet to have a single female Mormon client come to me who doesn't need to do like work to figure out who she is and what her voice is. I have yet to find like a post Mormon woman who just says like, yeah, I totally trust my own inner voice and intuition. Like it just like I have the best relationship with myself and I know how to navigate all that. Like it's just so ingrained so early on.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at some of the notes that we're taking. At one point, Jesse says to Jen, when Jen is revealing, like, by the way, like you guys are not invited, she says, "But you're the mom, you should have a say." And I think
Yeah.
just with the baby blessing in particular, that is just a really sad representation of how like the mother is excluded. You know, so all the women are excluded from this event because the Jen's friends are excluded, the women are excluded. I was wondering if they were going to like have Jen do something just to make the church seem less sexist, but they did not. And Jen is like explaining the priesthood to the cameras, why it's only for men.
That
And
was so
it was so
awkward.
and she was trying to like be very like take it very seriously. Like she was looking at like a missionary moment, like not kind of making like a joke about it, like with so much earnestness.
She thought it was gonna come out as positive.
Yeah, it was hard. That was hard to see too. And yeah, so then we see like, yeah, the blessing, all the men go up in the circle. They don't show the actual blessing, but they show all the men in the circle, like putting their hands on each other's shoulders. And Jen's just in the back. Like we see her like smiling with like Whitney or whoever else was there. And
then how they show at the end when the mom comes and like, there's food for
yes,
everybody, because that's their role, right?
Oh man, yeah. Just these things don't just like exist in a vacuum. It's just like thing after thing after thing after thing. Here.
It's so Mormon.
But it's so normal.
I'm so mad of all the people saying that
Yeah.
this is not Mormon.
It's so normal when you're inside and you're like, yeah, this like I'm gonna make snacks for everybody and the men do this. And then it's like, wait, like if my power is that, if the little power that I get as a Mormon woman is that I'm a mother, why am I not the one holding and blessing this child or a part of this ritual at all? Or not even in charge of the guest list. And so from the outside we see it, but I don't think that Jen or anyone or me either. Like I don't think any of us fully see that when we're in it.
And Jen too, when she's talking about during her speech about why it mattered and why she was not going to be the one giving the blessing that her husband was, she was like, you know, this is just like a little bit, I don't think intentionally, but it was a tiny bit demeaning to other religions too, because she was like, you know, this is not just say hallelujah and sprinkle a little water on the baby. Like this is the priesthood. And she kind of like slows down and is like, this is like a special blessing using God's power that has been given to my husband, you know, like, yeah, there's just kind of an emphasis.
When in reality, baby blessings is probably the hardest ritual to describe for Mormons, like to an outsider, or even to like for them to understand, because they're not receiving any kind of special. The baby's not receiving any kind of special power, and he's not receiving a salvific ordinance. So it's like a really hard thing to explain, and then to use it as like the example to say these other rituals like baptism in
Like an actual
Catholicism
baptism,
is that's not efficacious, but this blessing that we can't even explain what it is.
Just like
it
sending
is-
good vibes
yeah,
to a baby.
it's
is
more
just-
powerful.
Giving them their members.
Right,
Yeah.
because that's what it is.
Give the baby special powers in the blessing.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly. I would
spice
like,
this up.
please, let's make this more interesting.
Yeah, I hated that. I wrote this down where Jen says it's more important than quote hallelujah and sprinkling a little water on a baby. Like what she's basically doing is demeaning what Catholic infant baptism there
Mhm.
or christening.
Yeah.
That was
Which is a beautiful
disgusting.
ritual of its own.
Yeah, like
And I think that was like used as the defense for why the other women weren't there. Like, yeah, I mean, if it was just like a sprinkle of little water, like then they could be there. But
with the hallelujah.
with the hallelujah. Yeah. But this is the priesthood.
Hmm.
Like Mormons don't do hallelujahs, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
what
But
about
is the hallelujah shout? That's like part of the consecrated.
You have to be dead behind the eyes while you do it, though, or it doesn't count.
That's one of the
Anyway.
more culty things that we do when you watch that. I want to be the devil's advocate for a second, though, and just ask, as ex-post Mormons in this group, would you have, if you were at the house of a friend and you knew those friends' parents were Mormon, would you, if you were a drinker, I'm like John, I still don't drink alcohol, but if you were a drinker, was it appropriate for them to bring alcohol? Do you think that that was a douche move on the side of the ex-Mormons?
Yeah, pretty
I do.
douchey.
Samantha?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. The flask was, it's not like they were having a huge, big drinking party, but I do think that was just like a little tasteless.
Yeah, it's
Isn't that
hard 'cause-
classic, like gross ex-Mormon and Mormon behavior? Because the gross ex-Mormon behavior is like making a big deal out of it and passing the flask around like you're in 8th grade and it's cool. And it just kind of came off weird and disrespectful. It's not something that I would probably do if I was at a member's house. If I felt like I needed a drink, I'd maybe do it in private or with other people who drank. And so like that part was kind of icky ex-Mormon, and then how the Mormons react to that was like icky Mormon. And I think it just shows our shadow on all sides there. Like that whole situation, I think, showed some ick on both sides. Like, and I want to be fair to when that happens.
Yeah, it's hard because the Mormon, especially because it's someone's parents, it's not even just Zach's house, but it's hard because they have like this magical thinking around alcohol where they're like, even its mere presence in our hot tub could sully the whole, property. But then it's also like, yeah, but you're in someone else's home and you kind of need to respect that.
I think so too. I think both sides were being classically ick around the
I
alcohol thing.
completely agree. That was a hard scene to watch.
Mhm.
And it was, oh, yeah.
And Britt, like I want to say yes to this idea that we could do entire seasons on ex-Mormons behaving badly. And so I want to celebrate that you're bringing that to our attention. And this isn't to neutralize what you said, but I do want to distinguish between stuff that's authentically Mormon and stuff that might be just a relic of like this being reality TV and they're trying to create contrived drama. Because the disinviting from baby blessings, I think we've already established that's real everyday lived Mormonism. I think it's almost unheard of for ex-Mormons to bring a flask of alcohol to a Mormon family celebration and to be sneaking it where believers can see it. That to me, that is categorized more as reality TV drama than something that an ex-Mormon would
I
ever
don't
realistically
know.
do. But I don't know. Am I wrong?
I don't know
Disagree
on
with me.
that one, John.
Well,
Disagree with me. What do you think?
I have a story.
Okay, yeah.
Well, me and my partner Jared, we bought a bottle of wine to Thanksgiving once at his Mormon family's house, but we knew the vibes enough to know that it wasn't going to be like this huge, it's like they maybe would have preferred it not to be there, but you kind of have to suss out the situation, I think. And yeah, there's something specific about the vibes of like passing a flask around in a hot tub that's like, okay,
Okay.
probably don't need to do that.
Britt, push back. We love it.
Yeah, I think sometimes ex-Mormons, because we have what's called delayed adolescence as a people, we didn't get normal high school experiences. The whole hot tub scene, and I've seen multiple people say this on TikTok, it looked like adults acting like eighth graders, and the whole world saw it. And I think that we can own up to that was a little bit eighth grade. And I don't think it's as uncommon as you're saying, John, because I think sometimes ex-Mormons love to sometimes kind of like rattle things or show that they're not ex-Mormon. We have our own identity markers as ex-Mormon. And I think sometimes we can be a little bit childish about that and sometimes, bring out alcohol or say things that aren't respectful, or we want to look expressly ex-Mormon because we want to show that we're so not Mormon, which is a very Mormon thing to do. And so I don't know. I think that there are times that more ex-Mormons can act like what the world does in eighth grade. And I just think that was one of those moments, and it's not that rare. I don't think ex-Mormons acting like eighth graders is that rare.
And it's challenging when you're dealing with other people's sacred cows as well. Like where do you draw the line? Like if someone wanted a coffee to get through filming night in the hot tub, would that have been seen as, it can be hard to know where to draw the line there.
Like the most common coffee scenario I hear about in ex-Mormonism is like having to hide the coffee
People
maker.
hiding that, yeah.
More ex-Mormons hide their coffee maker when their parents or in-laws come visit. Like,
even though they know they don't go to church anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though they're known to be no longer in the church, ex-Mormons hide the coffee maker. That's where I'm coming from, Britt. Don't you agree that's pretty standard?
But that does.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. But that's like with your own parents versus this is like a hot tub. And so I think we're seeing like ex-Mormon hot tub behavior. And if you know anything, if you know anything, like let's be honest about the ex-Mormon community for a second, that when we start meeting together to talk about our faith trauma and everybody's marriages are kind of, getting a little rocky, people are trying alcohol for the first time in hot tubs, like there is an essence of that kind of ex-Mormon high school hot tub behavior that is a thing.
Well, Britt, I believe that happens when you're in a hot tub. That never happens when I'm in a hot tub. I just want to All right, let's talk really quickly about the scene where they're getting plastic surgery.
Botox.
They're getting Botox. Is a 22-year-old? Was it Layla?
Oh yeah, did the 22-year-old get it as well? Yeah.
Yeah, like they're going to get Botox, and like as a secondary gain, they're super excited for the laughing gas,
which is not normal. I've never heard of anyone getting laughing gas while getting Botox before.
I hadn't either. But what I guess we did a whole episode on Mormons and plastic surgery. I was shocked to hear a 22-year-old getting Botox, but like how Mormon or disturbing or not was that whole scene about Botox and laughing gas?
Generally, I feel like I watch a lot of dermatology TikTok. People like under, let's say like 28, just to be like generous with a cutoff point. Like you're not forming dynamic wrinkles at that age. There's really like no need to do it. They're probably doing it with the mindset of like, we've got to be so prepared to never get a wrinkle 5 or 10 years from now. It is excessive, even within like communities that do get Botox. I feel like 22, 24 is like really extreme.
It read to me like that was the reality TV exaggerated version of Utah.
Why Whitney in that face mask as well? Like that doesn't happen at med spas. What was that? What was she doing?
Where are you? Can I get one of those? But yeah, I did feel like we've talked before about how it is so common for Mormons to, have plastic surgery. And they emphasize that. They were like, yeah, well, we're not supposed to get tattoos or piercings, but they don't say anything about Botox or plastic surgery. So everybody has like boob jobs and lip filler. And and I think like them doing it younger just kind of felt like it was just like twisting the knife a little bit of what is normal, because it's a little bit extreme, but within like the range of something that's not shocking. Like I think people that are 28 will get Botox, that is not surprising, or get a breast augmentation. Maybe getting like 3 breast augmentations is surprising, but like one is anyway. So I just feel like it's like a heightened sense, but very Mormon.
Yeah, I can't not mention the stat that we uncovered during our plastic surgery episode that Utah has more plastic surgeons per capita than Los Angeles, and that plastic surgery levels in Utah are something like 3 to 4 times the national average. Did I get that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Not to shame anyone, just to like say that appearance and perfectionism seems to really impact largely women's appearance, and for some reason pressure for them to feel, whether it's, but the other thing I should mention is from our non-scientific survey, most of the ex-Mormon or Mormon women that have had the mommy makeovers, the tummy tucks, the breast augmentation, even the liposuction, or they say that they report high levels of satisfaction and self-esteem improvement as a result. So like I'm going to go with what they say,
because they have to live in a society that values, female aesthetics so heavily. So yeah, you're going to feel more comfortable or confident afterwards, given that.
Yeah.
For this one, I feel like I almost want to separate what is Mormonism here and what is just wealth. Because I live in Idaho, I live in Boise. Percentage wise, we're not that different, Salt Lake, as far as percentage of Mormons compared to percentage of Mormon, even though obviously Salt Lake's a lot bigger. And we just don't have the hair extension life, and it's just not the same here. It's not any of that, to be honest. It's not that pressure. And so I do wonder how much of this is related to just Mormon wealth. And this is what women of all stripes do when you're talking about that level of wealth, or whether this is more fueled by the Mormon side of having profit, saying put on a little lipstick, and having doctrines of perfectionism, and your only value as a Mormon woman being, eternally sexually available. And so you need to look that way. Like, certainly there are doctrines and things that are essential to Mormonism that are driving this. But when you go to other places, even other places that have heavy amount of Mormon, you don't get it as bad as you do in Salt Lake. So I just wonder if maybe there's also a wealth element there, because as soon as I drive from Boise to Salt Lake, I know when I'm in Salt Lake, because what is it? Just every billboard is boob jobs and Botox, boob jobs and Botox, the whole strip down to Salt Lake as soon as I get into the valley. And it's just not that way even in other high area Mormons quite.
I think it's definitely a combo between Mormon wealth and Mormons and wealth. Like, I think both of those things are kind of going together for why this phenomenon is more so than in other wealthy areas in the country, like LA. I think it's just is the perfect intersection of so much expectation on appearance, and then just massive amounts of money. So I think those things go hand in hand sometimes.
Well, the Book of Mormon teaches pretty explicitly that the more faithful you are, the more you're going to be blessed with wealth. So it so it is
kind
not
of beauty with the there's some countenance, Mormon face.
So it is not surprising that members of the church in Utah would want to show their wealth to other members of their congregation, because it's a way to show their faithfulness.
I think it's also normal when women are put kind of in these narrow roles and don't have either like the time or the resources or like the belief that it's worth it to like pursue their creative passions or things like that. It's very easy to then just get like excessively self-focused, and especially if you're Mormon and like the way your internal landscape is supposed to be is kind of predetermined, so you just like try and repress and like fit into that mold, then like your external appearance so easily can just become like the thing you hyper focus on, because that's just something you can do, that's something you can focus on. And I mean, it's totally playing into like, there's different flavors, there's different types of Mormons, and like these girls are very much, I don't know, there's like sort of the how do I say this? Like Dakota, for example, who like wanted to date the really hot girl who wasn't even in alignment with like what his standards were. But there is like a genre, I feel like, of members who are like men, patriarchal men, who will just be like, okay, I'm going to get the hottest wife. And I don't mind if she dresses immodestly and is like against the church kind of in that way, as long as it benefits me. But as long as it's not beyond that, I don't know. I think it can be like it can be kind of sad the way that, like, all of these women, I feel like they put a ton of time and effort into their appearance, and it's like they go to these events and it feels like the bulk of the time they spend at them is like taking pictures or like maybe creating the illusion that they have this really fun and exciting life. But I feel like a lot of it is kind of like an aesthetic veneer.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a harsh thing to say, I don't know.
But I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about in the last plastic surgery episode also, where these women are, you know, the everything that you were saying, Sam, and they're also having babies really young. They're having multiple babies, like really back to back. And that, I think, obviously changes your body, also changes your body from people that are your same age in a different group, you know? So 22-year-olds that are a mom of 2 children are going to have different bodies than a 22-year-old who's single.
And I remember when I was a Mormon wife and didn't even have children, like there was definitely this sense that like my youth had sort of been stolen from me in that. And so I wonder if there's something to be said for like women trying to, like a 22-year-old getting Botox, like being so concerned with making sure we look young forever, because like there's something going on in their psyche that's like, oh.
And also like you're fulfilling these really adult roles. You're taking care of, you know, human beings. You're the breadwinner for a family at 22, 24. So you might just be like, yeah, but I need Botox now. Like that's what women and mothers do. Like,
that's what being a woman is getting Botox.
That's like the identity of what it means to be a woman. So makes sense.
Real quickly, Britt, I know that prosperity gospel was a topic you kind of wanted to cover. Since we just kind of made reference to it, do you want to throw that in here, or do you want to wait till we get to a different part of the treatment?
Yeah, no, we can do that now. I just think it's interesting because it is something that shows up in any religion, because we're naturally superstitious as humans. We want our actions to earn us something. So this isn't exclusively Mormon. It's not even exclusively Abrahamic religion. Buddhism can become if you go to a Buddhist country, it becomes very prosperity gospel. When I went to Thailand, you know, you make offerings to the Buddha so that your business does better. And so prosperity gospel just shows up everywhere because we're superstitious creatures that want to make offerings to the universe in some way so that we're going to be blessed. I mean, that's just like innate human behavior that we're going to see everywhere. It's just really interesting in how it shows up with Mormonism, because we have specific scriptures that really speak against and warn against wealth, not only in the New Testament, but even in the Book of Mormon. You know, you have King Benjamin, you have lots of scriptures that say like, hey, be aware of when you're just caring about your appearance and your wealthy clothes and your costly buildings. Like, it's in our doctrine, like it's there. And it's really interesting that it's essentially not highlighted at all in our manuals on the pulpit. I can't remember the last time that I heard a talk where someone was really calling us out on how we're just caring too much about our appearance and our wealth, and we should be giving our wealth away, and we should cut down the cost of our temples because that's what the Book of Mormon says, that, you know, we don't need to have this be a burden on the people financially anyway. And so it's just really interesting that even though there is doctrine you can pull up in Mormonism that specifically speaks against prosperity gospel, it does show up and essentially as a culture, and even our talks, it's more likely that you're going to hear talks about blessings where if you're righteous enough, God will take care of you financially. And you're much more willing to hear those messages, even though we have doctrinal statements against that in scripture. We just essentially ignore them. Got it.
Okay. Well, let's turn to the Galentines party. And in the Galentines party, there was this, or right around it, there was this moment where they're kind of self-rating how Mormon they are, and then judging how Mormon some of the other women are. And I think as I'm remembering right, Demi rates herself as a 9 out of 10. And then Michaela makes the funny comment. Do you guys remember what Michaela says?
She's like, if you're a 9 out of 10, I'm a 12 out of 10. Was that Michaela?
Didn't someone else make a comment about her? She basically said, I can see your nipple right now. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So did you guys get what she was saying there? Like,
I guess
somehow,
Yeah.
I guess somehow Demi loses points because.
Good Mormons wear padded bras.
Okay, so she meant She didn't mean literally her nipples. She meant like,
I'm assuming. through
Yeah,
the
she'd
shirt.
freed the nipple, which
Okay.
God doesn't
Yeah.
endorse.
so she wasn't
Yeah.
wearing a bra.
Mhm. Well,
And that,
Yes.
so that she loses Mormon points for that apparently.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But then Michaela rates herself as a 12. Is that right?
Was that Mayci?
Was that Mayci? Anyway, what is it? Is
Mayci
that even
rates
worth
herself.
mentioning, or did we kind of already cover that?
Have you ever seen that? It's like a new age thing I see where it will have like frequencies down the side, like 520 hertz is the frequency of love. And it's basically just like quantifying how spiritually enlightened you are with these like, anyway, just kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah.
It's like if you're feeling fear or shame, then this is how unenlightened you are.
Yeah, it's just like a funny thing too that they are like trying to quantify this, and I think that's like a thing that we've been teasing so much, but just the idea that they have to like keep track of who's more Mormon, and they're like finding these specific things like, oh, you're not wearing a bra, so you lose points. You had too much fun with your husband, so you lose points. Like it is.
Yeah,
it is
you're
just
not
like
wearing
a
your garments, so
funny-
you lose points.
Yeah, it's like a funny ranking system.
Yeah. I mean,
We love ranking each other.
I don't think Mormons actually give each other or themselves numbers, but they're constantly boundary
The
policing
day bells
themselves
do.
and others. Oh,
The day
that's right.
bells
Yeah, that's a dark-
master the number
that's a
system.
dark- That's
They
a dark
have
joke.
a
That's a good
great
dark joke.
number system. I
You
mean,
must
it's
live in
very
Idaho.
intense.
You must live in Idaho.
That's right.
And then immediately that rating discussion pivots into the discussion about Fruity Pebbles and Fruit Loops. Does someone want to recount that? And then I feel uncomfortable being the one kind of talking about that. So do we talk
Not
about Fruit
it.
Loops and Fruity Pebbles, or do we just skip it? Britt?
Not it.
Not it?
Alyssa?
Okay.
All right. So basically what happens is they're rating each other based on who's the most Mormon. And one of them, I can't remember, was it Whitney? Who's like, well, Demi, she had that Fruity Pebbles thing, so she's less Mormon. And they're very excited about this memory. They're like, that was crazy. Apparently Demi had told them some sex story with her husband that she'd done, and she'd been talking on the phone with her husband on speakerphone. The women had heard, and this was off camera, but she had told them. So anyway, this is what had happened. And then they proceeded to role play what the story was, which they never told us the actual story. They whispered it in each other's ears a couple times. And then
Doesn't Whitney start to sit on another woman's face?
Yes. So they're acting out what Fruity Pebbles is presumed to be.
Yeah.
And they're getting ready for the Galentines party, and they put the Fruity Pebbles as a gift that they're going to give. Whitney does.
Wasn't that a mean girl move?
I don't think she meant it to be mean. I think she was just tone deaf, or just wasn't realizing
Even if
it
it
would go down that
wasn't.
way.
Yeah, even if it wasn't mean though, and she saw Demi's reaction, then you would have said, "I'm so sorry."
Yeah.
But she didn't. She
Yeah.
played victim. So then, then
Yeah.
we can't, even if it was good intentions, because then you make it about you and your feelings, then you still don't look great.
So basically
Yeah.
what happened was Whitney was like, I'm going to give this funny, I'm going to allude to this sexual story you told us as this present. So she wraps up a bag of Fruity Pebbles. And then Michaela's like, I don't think Demi's going to find it funny. Whitney's like, why not? It's a Galentines. It's supposed to be funny. But Demi had said that she wanted this party to be about feminine sensuality.
I could sort of see Whitney's mind again. I'm not saying I would have done it, but I'm just saying, as they were like, it's celebrating female sensuality. And she's like, oh, funny sex story from one of my friends. I'll do a callback. We still don't fully know the story of Fruity Pebbles to this day.
So then she opens it. Demi's looks like it clearly upset and
Didn't
says,
she seem
I'm
like
upset.
she laughed at first, though?
I think it was like a shock laugh.
Okay.
And
But
then
can
she
I just
goes,
say Mormons
"Not
don't,
cool."
I don't think Mormons do sexual gag jokes.
I think they
in
do a
groups.
bachelorette
Do they?
party.
Yeah, they
Okay.
do.
Yeah.
Okay.
They do.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I'm showing my age probably.
I mean, I think it's but it's always within the context of a bachelorette party or marriage. I think the boundaries of sexual gag jokes are very narrow.
And she is a married woman. I don't think it makes her any less Mormon to do something.
I think what I thought made the joke, because I thought at first, I watched it twice. When I first watched it, I was like, I don't get it. She was just trying to do this funny joke. They all talked about it. It's this joint thing. But then thinking about it, and then Demi was so upset. And to Britt's point as well. I think once you see that your friend is hurt, then you need to check in on why your friend is hurt.
Yeah.
But then rewatching it, I think what struck me as strange about it was mostly the fact that Demi and her husband had this conversation about keeping this particular event private. Demi had broken that contract by sharing it with her friends.
I know, it's kind of it's a boundary cross to have your husband on speaker and talking about an intimate sexual experience and not telling him that all of mum talk
everybody's there. So already it's like now your friends know. And she was probably thinking, well, it's just my friends, which already it sounds like the husband was upset about. And then now it's on national TV and being scrutinized.
Yeah.
And I do feel really bad about that because they'd explicitly said, like, we wanted to keep this intimate sexual story between us. And then now it's like this huge scandal that now now everyone's trying to like parse out what it was exactly. Like it just blew way out of proportion, I think.
Even though it's like unshame Mormons doing whatever they want in their marriages without it making them less Mormon.
And Whitney talking about it and bringing it up is what brought it from mom talk, secret, to national television.
Yeah.
I mean, like a Mormon couple's, let's just call it oral sex, being broadcasted globally. That's probably the first time that's ever happened in the history of Mormonism, right? A faithful, believing Mormon couple having their oral sex broadcasted globally. That is a pretty, it's a pretty intense thing, especially knowing that the Mormon Church literally outlawed oral sex in the early 80s. The prophet, Spencer W. Kimball, sent a memo to all Mormons saying oral sex is forbidden. And strangely, the members revolted and the prophet had to rescind that ruling.
Can we just thank our nasty Mormon parents for this being one of the times that I talked about where something goes off the pulpit and the culture says no? Our filthy Mormon parents.
Yeah.
They're so naughty.
Of all the things that they're not going to rebel
you guys said
against.
no. They said no.
It's not equal rights. It's not the Equal Rights Amendment. It's not the ban on black people having temple and priesthood blessings.
But if you take that
don't
away.
take my oral sex away, says 80s Mormon parents. Anyway.
You usually have to see about who's affected by those things. And usually if the white straight men are being affected by the rules,
that's
they're
true.
usually gonna go away.
That's so true, because Layla's over here never having had an orgasm before. So it's a more male heavy thing.
I've never seen that prophetic memo that all Mormon women must have orgasms.
No one's ever said that. Yeah.
No.
Weird.
Said no Mormon prophet ever. Anyway, this is also the moment where Whitney again emerges as problematic, because so strangely, she's labeled as being trashy by giving that gift. And then it cuts to her talking, I believe, to her mom. And forgive me for the swearing, but Whitney says to her faithful Mormon mom, that is fucking weird. What the fuck? And I'm like, said no, in my mind, said no Mormon woman to her mom ever.
Yeah.
Right? But also, so not only is it weird that Whitney, who wants to be viewed as one of the faithful Mormons, is dropping F-bombs in front of her faithful mom, but she's also like, instead of being concerned about embarrassing and harming her friend, this is where Whitney really starts to turn it up to 11 and how she's somehow able to make every crisis about her, right?
Well, it seemed to me like, it seems like she has a pretty fragile sense of self and is insecure, and then like suddenly having everyone, like I imagine she felt a lot of shame once she realized that Demi did not appreciate that gift, and then she like doesn't have a strong enough sense of self to then just be like, I'm so sorry, national TV shouldn't have done,
So
which
she
is
doubles
sad.
down.
Yeah. And it's again highlighting the thing of like, these are all women with multiple children, but like the emotional maturity is like kind of iffy.
Yeah. Okay, so then they cut to the baby blessing, and they basically contrast the sinners going bowling on a Sunday with the faithful, with the saints going to the baby blessing.
I can also just say that I love like the cinema choice of the producers being like, no, you need to go to like a dark and dingy bowling alley. Like they couldn't go to like a light and airy coffee shop. They needed the moody lighting of a bowling alley to go back and forth between the bowling and the baby blessing. So fun.
At least they didn't have them like going to a bar, right? What were you going to say?
But still, the world looked at that whole scenario and said, "I'd rather be bowling with those girls." So like,
Fair enough.
That's probably fair. But anyway, that was an interesting contrast. I will note that one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in ex-Mormonism, as a result of ex-Mormons being excluded from temple weddings, and sometimes mothers being excluded from the temple wedding of their own daughters, right? Which is a thing. If you're a Mormon mom and you leave the church, but your daughter decides to get married in a Mormon temple, you're excluded. Same if you're a dad, same if you're a sibling, in-law, whatever, you're excluded. One of the most beautiful things I've ever seen is this group WACA, Women of a Certain Age, which is like a support group for ex-Mormon, 40 or above women. They started a ritual where whenever one of the WACA women has to attend, has to show up on temple grounds as their family member, and all their other family members go inside to observe the temple wedding, other women from the WACA group will show up with the excluded woman and sort of like have a little party on the temple grounds where they laugh and they talk, or maybe they go get coffee, just to help the excluded Mormon mom or excluded Mormon, ex-Mormon woman not feel so bad about the fact that the entire rest of the Mormon family is enjoying this special moment, and they're excluded literally because they had integrity, owned up to their non-belief, and as a result were excluded from their own daughter's wedding.
I hadn't heard
Anyway.
that, John. That's really beautiful and really Christ-like. I love that.
Yeah, I hope we see more of that. Maybe there's another support group along the Wasatch Front called Lost and Found Club or Faith Journey Meetups. If any of you are in that group, we celebrate that group as well. Y'all can implement that ritual as well. Anyway, any other thoughts about the contrasting between the baby blessing and the bowling alley?
No,
No?
that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll say is just that it was interesting to see like Whitney bore her testimony before the baby blessing. Yeah, just like seeing some of that Mormon lingo on TV was just fun. I was like, oh, haven't seen this before.
For me, Whitney's testimony at the baby blessing showcased Mormon hypocrisy, because she's literally, in some ways, some of the most bad acting, unchristlike acting member of the cast. And yet she kind of gets up and does the sanctimonious testimony bearing in a really solemn way, in a way that sort of represents sometimes, gross religious hypocrisy, which isn't uniquely Mormon, and I don't mean to come too hard down on Whitney. Did y'all feel that or not?
Mm-hmm. I think it's why, when Whitney gets mad that Taylor seems to be forgiven and people still like her, even though her life is seemingly chaotic and messy, it's because Taylor just says like, my life is messy and I made some poor choices. And just that human element of like, my life is chaotic and I make more choices, and just admitting to that just makes you so likable as a human. And it's just something that for some reason Whitney doesn't see, that she doesn't see that it's not that your mistakes are so much worse than anybody else's mistakes. It's the sanctimonious, I'm going to put my testimony on top of it and not admit to any of my own accountability. Like, oh, there's just something that it's easy to recognize when you're kind of outside looking at it. We can recognize it in other religions, certainly, but it can be harder when you're in it to recognize, your own hypocrisy.
Yeah. And then doesn't Jen say at the end that she's glad she didn't invite the other girls, women? That was sad. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's episode 3. Episode 4 is this sort of girls' getaway at Park City, where they all decide to go to this super luxurious penthouse suite in Park City. And because this is where everyone's going to get real. And they have this worst idea ever, which was it the truth box? Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody want to talk about what happens with the truth box? Alyssa, do you want to recount
Yeah,
that?
so we have the truth box, which Demi says is her idea. It was probably a producer plant, but chaos ensues nonetheless. And they say we're going to put in some anonymous questions and everybody has to answer and shit gets real in the truth box. Oh, wait. I have to say right before the truth box incident, Layla, or not Layla, Jen said that she forgot her garments and someone is like, can we DoorDash garments? And I just thought that was funny.
That
And
was
then-
hilarious.
And then did y'all, when they all got in the jacuzzi, were they wearing one pieces? Like one pieces are like the most Mormon thing ever. Like Mormon women wear one pieces. Were they wearing one pieces? Do y'all happen to remember? I didn't
think it
pay
was
super close
mixed.
attention.
They were all wearing one pieces
Wait,
at
were they?
the jacuzzi for the
in Zach's
at Zach's
parents' house.
house.
No, not
Maybe
all of
almost
them were.
though.
Not
Was
all of
Jessie not?
them. And then there's another hot tub scene later
And
when
they
they're
were
in Vegas.
definitely
when
wearing
they're not-
bikinis in that
Yeah.
one.
Anyway, the world doesn't know that it is completely forbidden in 2024 for Mormon women to wear bikinis or two pieces.
It's pretty like all over the map though. Like my bishop's wife would wear bikinis in England. We
Yeah.
went to swimming at our stake president's house and everyone wore bikinis.
I guess I should say maybe in Utah, in like
Yeah.
Utah County.
Young women.
Depends on the
conservative.
circles. I feel like the type of, I don't know, there's different flavors, but these girls, I feel like a lot of that archetype will wear bikinis and it's not a big deal in Mormonism.
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
Mhm.
I was in the group that was like one piece only.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think at girls' camp, I think we still have the swimsuit conversations with girls' camp specifically because then it's actually leadership that can say what's approved or not. And so we can watch that conversation. But when we're talking about girls at a pool with their girlfriends, especially young, I think Sam's right. I think that bikinis are totally normal in that context.
All right. Well, maybe we can agree to disagree a little bit about how prevalent that rule is. I think it's getting pretty severe. Like, I mean, even it's get to the point where like those girls' camps up in Heber Valley, like you can't even wear shorts. You have in the heat of the summer at the Heber, girls' camps, they're making girls wear long pants in the summer because even shorts are starting. I think Mormonism, in terms of like female clothes based modesty, is getting more extreme than it was 10 or 20
Really?
years ago.
I think
it
I
used
think
to
the
be.
girls' camp thing, you're right about that, John. I think for girls' camp, that's a place where there's some like obvious control measures that we can see. And we can see that even something like BYU, we look at the beauty queens at BYU and they used to have like a sleeveless, graduation gown in the 50s or whatever. So I see what you're saying, John, in that context where the church has some obvious control. But when you're talking about those same girls at girls' camp who wore pants because they couldn't wear shirts and it's like really shamey, if you look at them at their friend's apartment complex pool together, even a group of Mormons, I think you'll see that they're not dressing like that except when they have to when in these areas where the church has a lot more control.
All right.
I will say this is just like a funny aside, but when I was in high school, somebody asked me on a date to a pool. As long as I wore one piece, I would not be invited on the date if I was to wear a two-piece swimming suit. And I was like so embarrassed that he even thought I was a person that would even consider wearing a two-piece swimsuit.
Wow.
I bolded this because it was so funny. So Layla, in the truth box, Layla gets asked, which of your friends' husbands would you sleep with? Her answer was Demi's husband, whose name is Brett. And I think he's the one who's like in his 40s, right?
Yeah.
Demi's like in her 20s or whatever, and Brett's in his 40s. And then Layla says, if y'all were together, do you remember what she said? She said, I'd climb him like a tree.
Yeah.
I love Layla.
Okay, I also have this marked. Do y'all feel like at least through episode 4, they're kind of treating Layla like a token a little bit, like the token person of color? Because I just feel like she's not involved in any of the core plots up through episode 4. And then, of course, 5, she has a little bit more of a feature. But I was just feeling like she's kind of ignored mostly for the first 4 episodes.
I think it's because she was a later addition to the group because the show wanted a
But
person. That's just
other
my
white
guess.
ones were too, right?
Jen
Yeah,
was.
but Layla had the tiniest social media following going into this.
Yeah.
And I imagine because it's Provo, Utah, there's not like a ton of women of color choices for the show.
Yeah.
I did like how she talked about. I can't remember the episode, but she talked about how it was hard to be Black and member of the church.
Yeah.
But
I hope she goes on Mormon Stories and fleshes that all out.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
she also was a big part in the story when Whitney didn't attend the baby shower, because
because they went to the salt
Yeah,
cave. I
because
feel
they
like
went
they
to the
kind of
salt.
used her in that to give her a scene because like no one else would want to have that talk with Whitney because they were just like, "What are you doing? Just like say you don't want to go at least."
Yeah.
Okay, and I think this is still part of the truth box. But there was this conversation where Demi says that Jen is too Mormon, that she brings up her Mormonism too much, and then also Demi says that is it Whitney is always talking about garments and BYU.
Jen.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure who it is at this point, but there is this conversation about people bringing up Mormonism too much. And Demi says it's gaggy that Jen wears her Mormonism as a badge of honor. I don't know. Did y'all notice that?
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting moment. Partially because like Jen is kind of using, at least for the sake of the show, at least like her portrayal in the show is using Mormonism as a badge of honor. She's like kind of the one that we see, like we have, Mormon is Jen and Whitney is Jen and Mayci is as well, but Mayci is less like controversial as a character. So I don't think like when we do the interviews talking about Mormon doctrine, it's usually Jen. This is the one kind of like preaching that. And so it is kind of interesting too to see within the group, like when they feel like it's too much and it was, Jen got really defensive of this. I mean, granted, everybody was being like cruel during the truth box, but this to me felt like the most gentle of insults to give of the night. But she was like, so you don't want to be friends with me then because of that? Like she felt like really hurt by that. So, which I mean, everyone was feeling hurt during the truth box, but yeah, just kind of interesting.
When the fight started breaking out in the truth box, Margie noticed something that was really disturbing to her. She noticed that the more heated it got, the more that there was tension and acrimony between group members, the more Whitney started smiling. Did y'all notice that?
I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, but she said in the confessional, "I'm loving it," right?
She said, "I love the
But
shit."
before it got
she
to
said.
her, right?
Yeah.
Is that the point Margie was making?
Yeah, just
because he was against Taylor. That's why, right?
Yeah.
But
it seemed like
Taylor.
There was some Schadenfreude there where Whitney was getting joy out of other people getting trashed. And that I think that reveals something about Whitney.
I need to rewatch now that you said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that too. It's hard to know. I guess I didn't look close enough to see if the audio was like matching up or if they were like Franken biting the smiling in, but
yeah, that easily could have been an edit.
But that definitely was like,
and it doesn't help if she's saying in the confessional that she's loving it.
Yeah.
Like I would have given her the benefit of the doubt of like maybe she smiles when she's a bit like when her nervous system's dysregulated. But
to be fair to Whitney, to give her some humanity in this, because it's hard sometimes to give her some humanity. If you get roasted, like absolutely destroyed on the internet because you dance with your newborn child and you just get, I mean, she got obliterated and I still see memes circulating making fun of her for that. Then anytime that it's human nature that like when you get internationally roasted, which, our nervous systems really aren't prepared to handle. If the people around you make mistakes and they're getting some heat, that's got to be totally human to just feel like a little bit of relief in that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she'd be that happy about it if she wasn't so roasted for that newborn dancing.
Yeah, it had to have been so traumatizing getting hung in the town square for that dance because, it was tone deaf. and you know, we can think what we want about it, but like at the end of the day, she wasn't like hurting anyone by doing that. It was just like a silly thing to do that like
I'd never
seems
show my
tone deaf.
face like if I thought that that was a good choice, and I probably wouldn't, but if I thought this is a fun thing, I want to celebrate my baby getting better, and I do that. Like the amount of heat that she took for that, I don't
Yeah.
think that I have it in me to show my face again. So for her to be happy that other people are getting heat, like we can at least say that that's very human, and like we're not above having that response.
I did think it was like a semi-impressive moment of vulnerability when Whitney, when someone said, "Are you jealous of Taylor?" and she openly admitted, "I'm
Yeah.
jealous of the forgiveness that seemed to come to her
Yeah.
more easily." Because again, just thinking about the fact that like Whitney didn't hurt her child by doing that dance, but like Taylor was arrested for like hurting a child by throwing a chair, and
Yeah.
you know there were like actual ways that Taylor hurt other people and like crossed ethical lines that like Whitney didn't really cross. Like I thought that was brave of her to admit that in that moment. But then I felt like all the other girls were like, "Can you believe that?" And then they also talked about how when she was like on ketamine, she admitted that she did it for likes and views. And I'm like, again, vulnerable to admit, good to recognize that in yourself. Glad that you did a psychedelic and it kind of like caused you to realize like, whoa, I do a lot of the things that I do for like the wrong reasons, you know. But I felt like they were just dragged her for it. And so I'm like, maybe I'm like too much of a Whitney apologist, but I'm like, when she gives like a little crumb, I feel like it gets thrown back in her face. But I don't know.
Yeah. I think Whitney has a reason to feel like she's being unfairly maligned. She did say the baby was getting better at the point she did the dance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just
Which
think
was
her
nice
brain had been so
humanizing.
broken by the TikTokification of everything. And she was just used to communicating with her audience through like dancing alongside text.
Yeah.
And it just like
Yeah.
didn't serve her in that moment. But
Which is
Yeah.
also interesting because like the big reveal that she was doing something for likes and clout, like that is what social media is.
yeah, duh.
Like you're posting it so that somebody sees it, especially if you're an influencer. Like I was kind of thinking that we're in a point like communally where we all recognize like, yeah, you post on social media so people see it. You
It's
know,
kind of like when they're
like
all
we
on the
not I'm trying to be better than everybody else by like pretending like we don't care.
yeah, like being on The Bachelor for the wrong reasons.
Exactly.
It's like maybe being there for love is the least smart reason to be there.
That's a good point. Really quickly, that ketamine thing was a really interesting thing to drop. On Mormon Stories, we had Stephanie Brinkerhoff on, and she just told this amazing story about how she was a depressed, super faithful Mormon mom who like tried therapy. She tried psychotherapy, psychiatry, and got so desperate that she tried mushrooms as a faithful, believing Mormon mom. It's one of the most popular episodes of the past year or two. Check it out. It's fantastic. But like over the past year or two, there almost are no ex-Mormons who, when they're telling their deconstruction journey, don't include some ayahuasca journey or a mushroom journey or an LSD journey. Like, and so in some ways, I was really happy that a psychedelic experience got injected into this series because and by the way, Mormon bishops, I recently found out about a Mormon stake president who took one of his bishops away for a psychedelic journey as an actively serving Mormon stake president and actively serving Mormon bishop. So I don't know if psychedelics is becoming more pervasive than average in Utah Mormonism, but it's absolutely a thing both in and out of the Mormon church. Now, this isn't an endorsement of ketamine or mushrooms or LSD.
But ketamine is a medical treatment now, right?
It is, but it's also disputed in terms of its efficaciousness. It is sometimes abused, and sometimes, like with the Matthew Perry case, the guy from Friends, like it can be prescribed and still either be not efficacious or be abused. But anyway, so not necessarily weighing in on the medical science of it all. And we didn't even mention MDMA. Psychedelics is raging in both active and ex-Mormonism.
I guess where
And
I
I'm
was
glad it
going is
came
like
up.
where I was going is psychedelics is something you can't get from a doctor, but ketamine is.
Mushrooms you can't, and unless you're in an approved trial with psilocybin or LSD.
Yeah.
Right.
I've had Mormon friends do ketamine therapy.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
My sense is like Mormon depression is at the root of this, that
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
really high depression rates, that's really well documented. And so then the active Mormons, I'm seeing more of the ketamine, because you can go into a doctor's office, you don't feel like it's illegal, you feel like you can then answer word of wisdom questions when it comes to the temple and illegal drug use. And so I feel like active Mormons, I'm seeing a lot more do ketamine. And then I see in ex-Mormon land, I essentially think it's a rite of passage. Like it's essentially a baptism into ex-Mormonism, is to do some form of psychedelics, break open your perspective, heal from your trauma, helps depression, all these other things. And so I think depression is at the root of this, and then it shows up with ketamine with active members, and then it shows up with more illegal psychedelics with ex-Mormons.
And a reference is the book How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, that does a really good job. And there's accompanying Netflix series, for you to explore that stuff if you want to. So the retreat to Park City ends in mayhem, with people screaming at each other, and I mean, Whitney's sobbing, Taylor's sobbing. The one point I wanted to make about all of this is there is a real problem with Mormons having dysfunction around healthy communication, about talking about suppressing things, having the elephants in the room, and just not being direct, but a lot of gossip, a lot of backbiting, and just a general inability to put up boundaries and or have healthy communication. That's what I took as being Mormon or realistic about the Park City meltdown. Is there anything else y'all wanted to mention just about the Mormon dynamics tied to
Can
the
I say one last thing?
Please.
And then I'll have to head out, John.
Please.
So this will be my last thing.
Yeah.
I see these conversations as a couple things happening. I see the Mormon idea of contention is of the devil. So like that sense of tension, you can see it with Whitney. Like she just wants to get out of there. Like
Right.
when her and Whitney are talking. And so you see this idea that we have in Mormonism, that when there's a fight, when there's cognitive dissonance, when there's tough conversations, that contention is of the devil. And so we do like shut that down. And that's very common with my Mormon clients when we're digging into things that they just don't even know how to then access their feelings anymore, because we're just so used to shutting that down. And then there's a gossip thing, because we're told not to gossip, but it's specifically for women. And we know with the history of Christianity that even talking about gossip in a Christian context was specifically because we didn't want women talking to each other, and that allowed men to have more freedom to do whatever they wanted to do. And so that was very specific to women. And then I also see just like delayed adolescence, right? So that they just seem a little bit emotionally young, maybe for their age, even though they're mothers. And so kind of the combination of that emotion, like there's some insecurity going on, and there's delayed adolescence, and then they'll sometimes say like therapy words, but they're not kind of doing it in the right context or the way that I think a therapist would help them with that concept. And then it just kind of devolves into watching 8th graders.
Yeah. All right, Britt. Well, we've loved having you for part 2. Thanks so much for joining us. Please join us again. You're the best.
My pleasure. Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye, Britt.
Other reactions about the meltdown?
I mean, I think another element worth mentioning is just the way patriarchy pits women against each other and can create those kind of toxic friend environments. I would be surprised if that's not playing, that's got to be playing into it, surely.
Yeah, especially because I can't remember if it was right here or later, but Whitney says something about how Taylor's really competitive, or at some point they're really trying to like distinguish who's on top and who's like the most powerful within the group, which I think, that stems from the patriarchal source as well. And like even just the way that we're watching these fights play out, I think, it's easy for us to like jump into like sexist language, like, oh, they're being so catty, or, things like that. But I don't know. It's hard to watch. I am continually impressed with Mayci. I feel like she's someone who is like a really emotionally mature and is able to, like what John was saying earlier, where some of the other women don't show on screen, a very are, very capable of having hard conversations. Like Mayci continually shows up and is loyal, but is also like not going to sugarcoat anything
Mhm.
and like tells people how she feels about, like, has those discussions with why she doesn't like Dakota and things like that. So I feel like she's a good example of healthy
Yeah.
communication here.
It's sad to me how women like have to they seek refuge with each other because of patriarchy, but then it's like because patriarchy is still so thoroughly installed in their brains, you're seeing it still come out in the ways that they're sort of like judging, and it's also human nature as well, but just like the constant judging each other and projecting onto each other. And like, because I feel like all of these women have like probably a higher than ideal degree of shame inside of them, it's like then very easy to like judge and project onto your friends. And like, maybe when Whitney's saying that Taylor's super competitive, maybe that's just like her projecting onto her, who knows. But yeah, I don't know, it's like the show's interesting because it's like by the end I really was like, oh, there is something beautiful about this like loyalty friendship thing that they have going on, but then it's also sad that it like isn't as functional as it could be, just simply because like they haven't received like basic education and like communication and like health. You like I don't know, it's challenging to have genuinely good mental health and appropriate like differentiation, individuation in Mormonism, because like it's a high control group and they like want you to be psychologically dependent on the group, aka on the patriarchy. So none of them are very good at like differentiation when it comes down to it.
Love it. So just some of the interpersonal dynamics. Whitney was asked to kind of say why she's mad at Taylor. And then Demi ends up going really hard at Whitney. And that's kind of how that kind of ends, is that Demi sort of takes on this role of just really going hard at Whitney, almost as if she's speaking for the group. And there's even this moment where it looks like it's like Taylor and Whitney are vying for alpha female, but maybe it's going to be Demi, you know what I mean? Like that was interesting. And then Whitney's reaction, to being so mercilessly attacked. And I do want to make one observation. I've watched enough reality TV, Survivor particularly, that it's very common for producers to like tell a cast member, you're going to be the villain. So one thing we don't know is how much Whitney has sort of been told, you're going to be the villain. And so we're ascribing all this bad behavior to someone who might just be playing it all up because she's been told to play a role.
Because
is that possible?
Taylor and Whitney have been like hyping each other up in their Instagram posts since the show's come out. Like it doesn't seem like the feud is as
it's a genuine
deep and
feud.
long.
Yes,
yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
But it seems like some members of the group do have actual, like it seems like Jesse really doesn't like Whitney to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was something that that a lot of women were debating on a podcast I was listening to, that Whitney wasn't there, about whether or not Whitney was intentionally trying to play a villain role or not. Most of the women assumed that she was maybe like leaning into it now, but that like wasn't her intention, and that she was like having a pretty emotionally difficult time with it. And this is again what they're saying, and maybe who knows, but I mean, honestly, the person we're talking about the most is the villain. She's the one getting the most views. So if it's intentional, like it's a good idea.
Working,
yeah.
And they do it because it works.
Mm-hmm.
So just quickly going to episode 5. I was pretty happy the Swig made an appearance. Do y'all want to explain Swig to or did they explain it sufficiently to the audience?
Soda. What do you want us to explain?
They called it Mormon Bar. Did you notice that?
Sure.
Called Mormon Vice at one point.
Yeah. But it's like soda plus a bunch of other sweeteners, right? Yeah. Well, you were all jazzed about it before.
I know. I got here late, so I couldn't bring a Swig, but I want to go get it after so we can start John Talk.
We need a better name.
You got a one-syllable name. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is.
All right. So we're not going to go into Mormon Swig territory necessarily. All right. So any other important parts of episode 5 that y'all think are worth mentioning?
Well, I think we have to talk about how Whitney left the group chat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So,
avoidant queen.
So she's mad that she keeps getting attacked. And so she what?
And so she leaves And which okay, I thought
Wasn't there like no reason she left? She just left.
and she didn't announce. Someone leaving a group chat. I think that happens sometimes. You know, for example, this group chat has been popping off. Someone that was going to be a panelist was like, I can't take all these messages about Mormon housewives, so I got to leave.
Yeah.
That's totally great.
Yeah.
You know, you explain why you're leaving the group, say you need some space, but just popping off, leaving without telling anyone.
And then being mad that people
and
are
then
not
being mad
asking
that
you.
people weren't asking about it. Oh my God.
Guys, I have more Whitney apologetics.
No,
you do?
Sam.
Before she, as far as I remember, someone tell me if I'm wrong. Before she left the group chat, they go to the, was it Layla's divorce party? Was that?
I don't
that
think that's,
episode?
I don't
That's
think
after.
What was
happened
the
yet.
event? Oh, she left the group chat before that?
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh.
So she left
This
the
is
group
really
chat,
early on.
at least the way that it's
So
at
she
least the way
left
that
after
it's
the
shown
There
in
was
the
Macy's
show.
birthday dinner too. That happened
In-
after the Park City retreat, but before the.
Park City retreat was
Was
What's
a
the
dinner.
one where she
No, but there was
goes,
also a birthday
she's
dinner.
wearing like the black and
It's
white
on Macy's. It's
dress
in Park
and she
City.
has a
Okay.
chat with Demi. And then Demi's basically just like,
that was at
was
at
that before the
Layla's.
group chat? Or
That was after. At least the way it's presented
Oh.
on the screen right now.
Yeah.
Okay, well then maybe my apologetics don't hold any water. But I could see, given that Whitney, like, I'm not saying what's right or wrong here. I'm just saying that given that Whitney felt very like, you know, left out to dry in Park City, felt like all of her friends collectively hated her, which like whether you're problematic or not, like that's like a harrowing
hard to
experience to
feel.
have like a
Mhm.
group of like mean girls turn on you, even
But
if you're one of
But
them.
Mayci was not. Mayci was on
I
her
know.
side. There was like 2 or 3 that were at
Macy's-
least on her side.
And Taylor as well was like caring about her emotions in
Yeah.
Park City, which
I was
Yeah.
impressed by Taylor
me
as
too.
well.
That was the scene where I was like, okay, I actually really like
Mhm.
her.
I noticed. Oh, I'm so sorry to back up a tiny bit, but Demi was getting really mad
Mhm.
at Whitney in Park City.
I didn't love that energy.
I didn't.
I felt like it
either.
was that thing of like, we found something problematic in you, so we're now allowed to be as mean as we want about it. And I like
Exactly.
understand the frustration. You know, it's all fine.
It felt like she was like trying to be like, I'm empowering, I'm taking a stand, but instead it just was mean.
Yeah, because it's like if Whitney's problem, I don't know, if you are her friends, then if she's problematic, like call her out more gently. I felt like Taylor was striking the right tone of like, it sounds like you're really hurt. Like, let's talk about
Mhm.
this.
And Taylor said at one point, like, I understand that you're like maybe overreacting, but I know that I really hurt you. And
Yeah.
I was like,
I was like,
yeah.
Taylor.
I was like, Taylor, are you like mothering your
Yeah.
friends? Like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, but anyway, I could see it being tough to say in the group chat, I'm leaving, if you know that it's gonna then create a shitstorm of all these girls bitching about you. But
but they're gonna bitch about her anyway because it says
know.
on the thing, Whitney Levitt has left the group.
yeah,
it's-
I'm sure it was like a triggered moment where she just like her feelings got way too big and she was like, it seems like she leans avoidant. Like when she's like having feelings that are hard to manage, she moves to Hawaii or
But
becomes a homesteader.
not just avoidant, but I think she becomes avoidant because she won't accept responsibility for anything.
Yeah, and I think she struggles to accept responsibility because she's so insecure and her sense of self is so weak
Mhm.
that she like so easily doesn't feel like they even care. Like again,
Yeah.
I feel like there have been moments like where she's been taken in bad faith, where to me I'm like, I feel like her admitting that she was jealous of Taylor, like that's a pretty like that's brave to do. I don't know. I
Yeah.
realize I'm in the minority with this Whitney take.
I think you want Whitney on Self on the Shelf. That's what I think you're going for.
Oh, don't tease Whitney if you're watching. I'd love to redeem your image.
Yeah, Whitney, call.
I got you, girl.
Call Samantha. She helps me. She'll help you.
Yeah.
So, did y'all notice at some point they go to Jen and Zach's house, and
Oof.
no, they go to Whitney. At some point, did you notice that? Was it Whitney who sweared and Connor corrects her? Did you notice
Oh,
that?
yeah, that was at Whitney's house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also have to say that every single time they show Whitney's house, they have to show either the giant Jesus picture that they have in their house,
Yeah.
either pan to that same one or a different one, or the temple.
Yeah.
Like that is like their indicator of like, okay, we're gonna go to a Mormon scene now at Whitney's house. So like Mormon scene.
I also love how her husband doesn't seem very good at like doing reality TV because like
like,
she's
so
like a good,
earnest.
everyone else is pretty good at like the acting component, but he just walks into the room and he's like, you'll never guess what I just, and she's just like, just interesting.
Should we make anything of the fact that Whitney swears in front of her faithful mom, but when she swears in front of Connor, who was on Tinder, endlessly.
I know. I'm like, if you had Tinder your whole marriage, let your woman swear. That's on her to police herself, not you.
Like,
And she like
The
apologizes.
policing.
Like she's like, I know I shouldn't swear.
It might be because there's kids around in their
Oh,
defense.
that's fair.
Yeah,
Maybe it's that.
because they zoom in on the kids.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
but I
That
think
could
it's
be
also
simple.
because Mormon women want their husbands to just sort of be righteous priesthood holders and to like show leadership, because the husbands are supposed to preside in a Mormon home. Don't faithful Mormon wives want their husbands to step up and sort of make sure the home is extra Mormon or not?
Spiritual BDSM. Like, she likes to be put in her place by a man who she earns more money than.
Until they become like Jen, right? And stuck in like a super unhealthy marriage.
I think like whether she wants it or not, that's kind of that's the expectation.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't think she's, or most Mormon women are like put off by a man being like, hey, you know, don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So where else do we go to from here for
The
episode
Taylor
5?
not wanting to get married.
Mm.
Still saying that she's gonna push the boundary, even though she knows that the church doesn't approve of it. But she says it's better to basically not get into a unhealthy marriage that's gonna end badly than rushing it, which I think I really appreciate.
Yeah, I wish she would have had the same like seriousness with having a baby, because
Mhm.
she had like 2 failed pregnancies or whatever, and like just didn't. She seemed like she wanted to have a baby
Yeah.
with Dakota.
Yeah.
And I've seen that even outside of Mormonism with like some other reality show. I can't remember what one it was, where it was like they're having a baby, but marriage. Well, no, I don't want to get married just because I'm having a baby. And to me, I feel like having a baby is a way more serious thing. But I don't understand that like flip for some people.
It almost seems like, I don't know. And I'm not exactly sure, but like the way that this was presented right now, it seemed like Taylor was like, I know I can be a mom. I just don't know if and like, but Dakota, like, it kind of seemed like both of the men throughout this series, both meaning Dakota and also Zach, make comments about like, if we got divorced, like you would be the one taking care of the kids, essentially. Like Dakota doesn't know how to change a diaper. So it seems to me like Taylor is like, yeah, I know how to be a mom. But I don't know, like you are kind of, you're kind of not really a factor,
Yeah.
you know, which I thought was a really interesting, like, did Dakota say something? I can't remember if Dakota actually said something about that or if it was just Zach, but it was interesting too when Zach and Jen gave like Dakota like try to teach him how to do basics like change diapers and
So he's like holding the baby,
whatever.
and then they're playing the audio track of a baby screaming, and he's supposed to like put the powder to make the milk bottle while he's holding the baby while the baby track is
Which
screaming.
I was like, man, I really hope this is just for TV because she is due in like a month. I really hope that you already know how to change a diaper.
Men will be like, it's my dream to have 7 kids, and they've like never changed
they're
a
like, I have
diaper.
no
It's
idea.
like, so you have no business having an opinion yet.
So in Mormonism, women are obviously like my kids went to Utah high schools when they did like family and human development class at like Skyview High School. They had to carry a baby around for like a full week. And I think that's like a pre-punitive sort of warning shot to young Mormon Utah women to say, don't have a baby.
They do it in
'cause-
Mexico too. I don't
Oh,
think
is
it's
that
a
not
more,
just a-
No, I don't think it's
maybe
a more
that's
I thought
a
that was just in the
conservative Christian
movies
thing.
where they make
No.
you carry-
My kids had to carry around a baby for a week.
like a fake baby that like
yeah.
cries
It
and
was
then
like-
they get a rating because the baby gets like a kind of like, you know, like where you fed it or changed it, and then they get a grade. You
in
get a grade.
school.
Yeah.
Oh,
High
yeah.
school.
Wow.
Well, Michael, you know, it seems like somehow Mormon women, when they're young women or girls, learn how to change diapers and learn how to feed babies. Do young Mormon men or young boys ever learn how to change diapers or feed babies? Or is that really not on the agenda?
It's probably family dependent, because my partner Jared is like second of 9, and he said he changed a lot of diapers growing up. But I
Okay.
feel like in some families, just the girls are taught to do that.
Yeah.
And I think like in the community, like being in Young Women's, we did a lot of babysitting, of course, like babysit the kids while the women from Relief Society went to the temple. Like that happened all the time. And I think those opportunities are less common for men, boys. So I think yeah, it is family dependent, but then the structure, I think, offers fewer activities to teach men and boys how to like take care of a kid.
Did y'all notice the comment where Jen says about Zach, he's not a nice person if the house isn't clean?
Wow.
Did y'all notice that?
Oh yeah.
He's not a nice person.
I know. And what was so striking about that too is like, I mean, who knows? Maybe he's like does great cleaning and he cleans everything, but like they didn't say like, yeah, Zach cleans the house.
Yeah, I'm
like it was passive voice, you know, like Zach isn't a nice person when the house isn't clean, not he cleans the house.
When he
you
runs
know?
out of time to clean the house, he has a hard time with that.
Right, exactly. Like we know that Jen is the breadwinner, and they insinuated later on that she's the one taking care of the kids because Zach said something about how like it would be hard, worried about taking care of them if the parents were away or whatever, or if Jen was away. And then like the house just gets clean, like they don't address it either way. And generally, if the man's cleaning it, he gets a lot of credit. And if it's just ambiguously clean, it tends to be the woman. So yeah.
And just interesting that she's from a poor family and he's from a wealthy family and her mom's a cleaning lady.
Yes.
I thought it was fascinating when Zach is trying to tell Dakota what it's like to be in a marriage, and he tells Dakota, hey, if Taylor has a baby, once she has her baby, you can't be intimate for 3 to 4 months. And I thought there were two interesting things about that. One is it showed how Mormons can't say the word sex. So when a Mormon says be intimate, what they mean is have
no
sex.
intimacy of any kind, no eye contact.
Yeah, no hugs.
But he said, yeah. So Zach says, sorry, Dakota, you won't be able to be intimate for 3 to 4 months. And then Margie's like, 3 to 4 months?
So like
2? That's like, 1 to 2, like 3 to 4.
6 weeks. 6 weeks.
But I mean, I guess that shows what Jen's told Zach anyway.
Maybe you can have like things happen.
Yeah.
Or,
I thought that was
maybe the vibes just simply aren't there when your husband is Zach.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So there was the tattoo parlor scene. Is that interesting at all? Are faithful Mormons getting tattoos more and more these days? I guess it was taken out as a prohibition in the Strength of the Youth pamphlet. So I'm guessing tattoos are becoming more and more common in faithful Mormons.
I don't know. I would love to know how much that is infiltrating, like actually.
I heard from a Mormon friend recently that she was considering getting a tattoo.
Ooh, that's exciting.
So
yeah, I'm guessing they're becoming more and more.
Yeah.
More and more common. All right. Other parts of okay. So when Dakota and Taylor show up to the filming shoot for Demi's product line, isn't Demi doing what's that?
Baby mama? Are you talking about Mayci's?
Is that Mayci?
Yeah, I think
okay,
so.
sorry, I do get them all confused.
Yeah.
There's a degree to which they all kind of look alike.
Definitely.
I hate to say that.
Jesse and Demi, I can hardly ever tell them apart.
That took me
hard.
like 4 episodes before I was able to
I've watched the whole show like twice and I'm still like
Okay. So it's Mayci who's doing a product line of this what?
Baby mama. So
which is what?
It's basically supplements for women.
Which is so Mormon because Mormons are into supplements, right?
Yeah, it's very Kourtney Kardashian of her as well, though.
Oh,
I feel
okay.
like it's like trendy to do it.
Okay, so Macy's got baby supplements, which is interesting.
And she's
go ahead.
No, sorry.
No.
Well, she said she was inspired. The name came because she was, I can't remember if she was what the thing was, but basically she encountered a same-sex couple that were having a baby through a surrogate, and she was like, oh, it's like your baby mama, and that's so cute. And it was just interesting that whether or not that's a true origin story, she wanted to tell this, even though she's one of the saints, right, Mayci? She wanted to tell the story on the show that like this same-sex couple having a baby through a surrogate, which would not be okay by the LDS Church leadership's opinions. That's what inspired her to name her business.
And is that the first time any LGBT issue sort of has come up in episode 5?
They had that little joke with the truth box, like who would you go lesbian for? And then they all like
so high school
pretended to kiss each other.
Yeah. Who would you go lesbian for is like peak high school girl friendship.
Okay, but other than that, it's kind of the first time the LGBT question is even brought into it in episode 5. Anyway, so Dakota and Taylor show up. She wants to do Mayci, right? Mayci wants to do photos of Taylor with the product, baby mama. And then weirdly, Dakota wants to take his shirt off.
Iconic. He's like, my shirt's so ugly. I'm just going to take it off.
Content king. He's like, let's get in there.
Like, not miss a beat. I am removing my
He
clothes.
really wanted to have his shirt off for it.
Was that a little weird?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
Like, not only did he inserted himself, but
I do think
shirtless.
it was maybe I'm reaching, but I did feel like a bit of a moment of like a man not really recognizing that like as Mayci had to explain, like she is working. This is like a product photo shoot that she is doing. And he's just like, I'll just like get some free shots. I'll just like weasel my way in there.
Mm.
Like he's not necessarily like respecting her time or like business
Yeah,
in that
for sure.
moment.
And getting partially nude in her place of business.
And getting partially, which someone else was dragged for doing in front of Dakota, but then he does
That's
it in front of
true.
Mayci like it's nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Who was the one that got in
Was
when
it-
Taylor was like,
was
you
it
got in your bra
Demi?
in front of,
I
yeah.
think it was to me.
She came
I
out in
don't
her
know.
bra,
The double standard is there, is what I was
and he
saying.
comes out fully unclothed.
Yeah.
In this top.
He was braless. His nipples were fully
Exactly.
showing.
Some both.
Interesting. All right. Well, episode 5 ends with Layla. Finally, Layla gets a little bit of attention. It's a divorce party,
Whoop, whoop.
which we just did an episode on Mormon Stories podcast on healthy divorce, happy divorce. We haven't released it yet. It's going to be really good. But we actually introduced the idea of a divorce announcement and a divorce celebration.
I love that.
Of just like, let's drop, too many wives of Mormon dentists are being killed. I mean, it's true. The stigma around divorce within Mormonism is way too serious. It's causing way too many people to stay in abusive marriages, way too many people to stay in unhappy marriages. Let's lift the stigma. Let's celebrate people for whatever time they're able to stay together. I think that'll make divorces less acrimonious, less expensive. If people don't feel like they have to blame the other person
Better for kids.
and battle over the custody and make the other marriage partner look like a sexual predator so that you can get full custody. Like, it's a disaster on every level. This even came out with the Jody Hildebrandt, Ruby Frankie, Kevin Frankie stuff. It also came out with the Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow stuff. Like, we just got to drop the stigma on divorce in Mormonism and even broader. But Mormonism takes it to an 11 because these marriages or temple marriages are supposed to be eternal, and that just raises the stakes for everybody. Anyway, I loved seeing Layla host a divorce party. Hey, any thoughts on that? I guess you're agreeing. Samantha, you're kind of snapping.
John, you know I love divorce. So I was thrilled to
Samantha's
see it.
pro-divorce.
Yeah, it was great. And I think like the stakes are especially high for Layla because she's so young. She's what, 22? She was youngest, right? And so the shame about being divorced already exists. And then the shame about getting divorced at 22 with 2 children is even higher. So it was just really great to see.
Was that Layla's second divorce?
I think
No,
that
Was that her
first.
second? It was her first?
A lot of
Yeah.
the women
Okay.
have been divorced, but that was her first.
Okay. Any other comments on that party? Because that's kind of
One
how
thing-
episode 5
One
ends,
thing
right?
that this is nitpicky, okay, but I was like, ugh. So earlier on in the episode, Layla had mentioned that she was like, yeah, I want to take things slow. I'm not, looking to get into another relationship really quickly. And then at the divorce party, and I know it's just like girlfriends trying to have fun, but within Mormonism, we have such a hard time with single women.
Yeah.
It makes us so uncomfortable. And so like at the Chippendale event, it made more sense. But here at her divorce party where she's like embracing like not being attached to anybody, they're like, hey, there's this other guy. I want to set you up. And it just felt like, and again, maybe in this context, it's just playful girls trying to like be supportive. But I feel like for the larger, broader Mormon culture, like when divorce is already stigmatized, and then when you do get divorced, you better get remarried as quickly as possible, especially if you have kids, because you don't want that scarlet letter to stay on you any longer than it possibly has to.
Yeah. Well, I guess I lied because that wasn't the final scene of episode 5. The final scene wasn't in Taylor and Dakota's home, where basically Taylor wants Mayci to reconcile with Dakota, right? And so Mayci shows up,
Oh, and they have the
and
fight in front
Taylor's
of her.
trying to stage an intervention between Dakota and Mayci. And it goes really south and kind of sad. And it ends up with Taylor sobbing and Taylor and Dakota kind of getting in a fight Did y'all notice anything about the dynamic between Dakota and Taylor when Taylor started sobbing?
I have a lot of thoughts about their relationship. Like, it is really sad. Like, clearly Taylor has attachment trauma, attachment insecurity. She even says that that's something she's learned in therapy, is that she doesn't deserve the happy ending. But I feel like there's something between, you know how they say you're not supposed to, you know, when you're like doing AA or like you're in rehab, you're not supposed to like start a new relationship. Isn't that a thing, John? It is.
Yeah.
They both met
Yes.
each other in a very tenuous time.
Yes.
Like, she, whether or not she's an addict, like she had some substance abuse issues, because that's like what got her. Well, that's what got her. That's what made the swinging scandal happen. Not that like made it happen, like it's her fault, but like she was really intoxicated that night that she like crossed that boundary with someone else's husband, and he was sober. And then like that fight she had with Dakota, she was really trashed. And then he's also recently in recovery. She's also just gone through like a crazy like public hanging in the town square situation. And then these two find each other. It's like a little bit iffy of a foundation. And then I also feel like it seems to me like she like knows deep down that he's not like her person, like her dream man. And so she keeps referring to this situation that happened like around the time they weren't really official yet, which is like kind of a gray area. Like, I understand having feelings about it, but I do feel like in an otherwise good relationship, you'd be able to let that go. So she obviously has like trust issues with him that go like deeper than just that. Cause I feel like by the time you're pregnant with his baby, you know, it's not like if she had no reason to think he's cheated since they become official.
And I think it was the lying too.
Yeah. I feel like she has some sense of like, this man is not like it the way I wish a man would be, but I don't feel able to I don't necessarily even believe that I could find better, which is what's sad about the whole thing. And I feel like he's constantly like sensing that in her. Like, he kind of knows he's punching in a way with her, or however you want to like describe that. And so it's kind of just like this fundamental thing they don't seem like ever able to reconcile.
And he gets just continuously more and more angry
Yeah.
about it.
The more she's sobbing.
Yeah.
And it just seems like
Yeah.
as the series goes and as the conversations go, like he just is just so frustrated. And was it this one where she said that I don't remember if it was this episode or a different one, but the same fight that they've had many times, and she's like, I just don't want to I don't want to give in to you.
Yeah. The fact that that phrase, she was like, I'm not ready to give in to him yet. And it's like, even the fact that you would characterize like choosing to commit to this man that you like kind of chose to have a baby with, as giving in is like showing something about the culture.
But I mean, historically, Mormon wives covenant to submit to their husbands.
Yeah.
That's and the proclamation on the family declares that the husband presides in the home.
So perhaps like she's feeling subconsciously or consciously, like regardless of her choosing him, like she's able to have a little bit of power and a little bit more of that differentiation by not being his wife. And it's really sad to kind of see that play out.
And didn't we learn, I don't remember who said it, but by this point in the season, we know that they got in a fight, and like in the fight, he's like calling her like an effing whore.
Yeah.
And again, that's just always a
Mayci
red flag.
recounts that.
Yeah, always a red flag when like, first of all, you're the one who was apparently sleeping around when you guys started dating. She wasn't. But like when that's the insult that you go to when you're in a fight about the fact that a woman doesn't want to commit to you.
Red flags.
Yeah.
So Dakota doesn't come off looking great at the end of episode 5.
And I'm sure Taylor has a
He
sense
never
that he
did.
will be
I
more
don't think he's so
controlling
annoying.
once they're married.
Gerardo, you're not a Dakota fan.
No.
No, me neither.
No.
You kind of were.
Yeah,
you were a little bit of
You're
a
a
Dakota
Dakota
apologist.
I've after reading the comments, I take it all back. Dakota's worse than Whitney and Taylor.
Yeah,
and
isn't it funny? Like Whitney's the villain of the season. I'm like, okay, at the end of the day, she's just like a problematic, messy bitch.
Yeah.
But like,
No,
there are like actual
Zach
abusive men on
and-
this show that are giving like violent potential.
I mean, I think if there really are villains right now, it's kind of for the men. It's Zach and Dakota.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
anything Whitney's done like really does pale in comparison to that. Like, lest we forget, like, I just don't want us to lose sight of that just because it's so easy to like hate the women. And obviously it's like part of the fun that there's like a lightness and a darkness to the show. But I'm like, these men are like the true villains.
Like the stakes of their villain arcs are very different.
Yes. Yes.
That's an important point. All right. We love you, Whitney. You're welcome on Mormon Stories podcast.
Mormon
as well.
Stories is officially pro Whitney. You're going to lose all your subscribers.
This episode is brought to you by Whitney. All right. All right. Well, I think we did it. I think we covered episodes 3 through 5.
Yay.
Which means that our final treatment of, other than having all of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives on Mormon Stories podcast, individually and collectively as a group, we can all dream, right, Samantha?
Yep. And then just
We
like
can dream.
random different configurations.
Exactly,
To just like do
like,
gossip about the other
The
clips.
next year is just going to be dedicated. to
Yes.
Every
Secret
week
Lives.
there'll be a
The
different
discourse
combo.
is going to be never ending on Mormon Stories podcast.
Other than that, we have one more episode planned, which will be the grand finale,
It's going to be
which
so
is
juicy.
episode 6 through 8. The Vegas trip, the Chippendales, the Zach meltdown with the text. Like, you have not seen anything yet. This is where it all
Yeah.
unravels. Final words. We'll give each of you a chance to give a final summary. Gerardo, I'll give you a chance to go first. Any final words for today?
No, just tune in for the next episode. I think the analysis was pretty great.
All right. Sammy?
Yeah, I'm just so excited for episode 3. John, it's so fun seeing you be like invested in reality TV. What a treat.
I am a huge Margie and I love Survivor, believe it or not.
I know you guys do.
We've probably seen like 30 episodes of Survivor.
But this is like a different flavor, you know? So
Yeah.
it's fun to
I'm not a Bachelor or Bachelorette fan. I have
No.
not enjoyed, what's the British one? The
Love Island.
Love Island. I probably would like Love Island.
Yeah, it's Love Island UK is so good.
I do like Shark Tank. We have just started watching Shark Tank. Why are you laughing?
It's, you can't
Business
compare-
boys.
You can't compare Shark Tank to Love Island, Sean.
Yeah.
Sorry. I didn't compare them. They're both reality TV, aren't they? Kind of.
That's the associations, I guess. There we go.
Okay. All right. Thanks for putting me in my place a little bit. All right.
You've not
Good. Okay. So Alyssa,
Yeah.
final thoughts.
Final thoughts are the show is fantastic. We really hope season 2 comes out. We have
Oh, is there possibly a season 2?
possibly that's the hope.
there
Mhm.
has to be, surely.
There has to
Come
be.
on.
So there hasn't been signed yet, but that's why we need to make more content about this to try and
Okay.
promote
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
into a 10-season show
Okay.
that Sam becomes a star in.
Can the Mormon Church weather it? Okay, really quickly, as of episode 5,
Ooh,
is this good for the Mormon Church overall or bad for the Mormon Church? Alyssa, good or bad? 1 or 2 or neutral? Good, bad, or neutral?
Good.
Because?
Good. As of episode 5.
Because?
Good because I think we're seeing characters improving. We're seeing redemption. We're seeing atonement that they've mentioned a little bit, which is very good branding for Mormons. We're seeing cool, hot people identifying with the church. They're not weird. So decultifying it a little bit.
What if there's some high-level strategists who, like, in the Mormon Church corporate headquarters that actually came up with this idea, pitched it to Hulu, and is actually behind it all?
You sound like an ex-Mormon that just tried weed for the first
All right. So Alyssa says
I think
good.
as
Gerard-
of now.
as of now.
As
As
of
of episode 5.
5.
Gerardo,
Yes.
good or bad for the Mormon
Yeah, I
Church?
agree. I agree. It's good.
Good for the church.
Yeah.
All right, Sammy, are you going to go with the consensus or are you going to diverge?
I truly believe any coverage of the Mormon church of any variety is a net negative for the church because
Why?
the truth is going to win out. I like the show. I think these are nice girls, but I'm not just like, ooh, cool. It doesn't make me think they're cool. I'm
I
like,
want to
these
convert.
are sad
That's
mums at
fair.
Chippendales. So I think it's a net negative and I'm happy about it.
I mean, because Sammy wants the church to burn. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, okay. I'll say something that makes me think you could be right. If you think about like Tyler Glenn, David Archuleta, Dan Reynolds, Mindy Gledhill, like how many times now do we have to see these Mormon celebrities? Half of the people who are on the I'm a Mormon commercials, they all end up leaving the church. There's something about being a celebrity Mormon, other than like Steve Young, who we love on Mormon Stories podcast, along with his wife Barbara, and maybe the Osmonds. Like pretty much all Mormon celebrities these days, especially younger ones, end up leaving the church. So what happens when these housewives start leaving the church, start reading the CES letter, start talking about their apostasy, like Heather Gay, right? Like Heather Gay by, she's publishing the book Bad Mormon. She's talking about her loss of faith on these episodes. Certainly if there's a season 2 or a season 3, the arc is going to be them talking about Joseph Smith, talking about polygamy, talking about leaving the church, talking about problems with patriarchy. Like, isn't that almost inevitable if there is a season 2?
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That's a good point, because that's something that they apparently recorded. I think I said this earlier. They recorded like all of their stories, some of which include some ex-Mormon stuff. So if they get into the next season, maybe we would learn more about them as characters. Maybe in the next season, we move away from mom talk and into them more as people. That would be the direction I would hope.
I could see it splintering more for next season, definitely.
There's just no doubt that it's going to go from like 7 believing / faithful Mormons down to like 2 or 3.
Do you really just think by virtue of them becoming famous, that's going to make them less Mormon?
David Archuleta, Dan Reynolds, like.
But David Archuleta was gay and had like a good incentive to deconstruct.
Well, don't these women have gay family members and friends?
No, you're right. But sometimes when like the trauma of fame can make you cling more tightly to your in-group. So I guess I just don't know.
I don't know either for sure. But if past is prologue, I predict that several of them will not only leave the church, lose their faith in the church, but it'll become woven into the plot of future seasons, like the fabulous Heather Gay of Real Housewives of Salt Lake.
Maybe because they deconstruct the patriarchy of these relationships.
Yeah. And I guess having a lot of like money and fame and opportunities does maybe make it like you have reasons to want to distance yourself, but also that it's probably like liberating to realize like, oh, I'm not financially bound. I'm not, you just have a lot more like freedom to move. I feel like, if you have a #1 show on Hulu, maybe.
All right. Well, that's a cliffhanger. Thank you, Alyssa, for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you.
Check out Zelf on the Shelf. Subscribe to Zelf on the Shelf.
Subscribe to Zelf on the Shelf. We just celebrated Russell M. Nelson's 100th birthday. He is a Pisces king.
Oh, beautiful.
So come join us for this week's video.
Subscribe to Mormon Stories as well. Alyssa, how do people follow you?
Follow me on TikTok at Liz Likes Words. Check out my writing on my website, alyssawhitbeck.com.
Okay.
Instagram, Alyssa Whitbeck.
And Gerardo, how do people follow you?
My social medias are private, but so
just send him good vibes from wherever you are. He'll feel them.
I'll feel good. Follow Mormon Stories.
Yeah.
Subscribe. Go to mormonstories.org and click on the donate button.
Yeah.
Gerardo helped renovate our website. If y'all want to check that out, along with my friend Dave and other people, like new fully functional website, a lot of cool features. Couldn't do it without you. Let me quickly read one super chat that came in. We were low on super chats this episode, but Cassie writes, I am grateful I began my low-key obsession with Mormon stories about a year ago and had all the context I needed for Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. As an Australian, never Mormon,
hello, fellow Commonwealth,
who has never met a Mormon in real life, the show is fascinating. Honestly, Cassie doesn't need anything other than Mormon stories and Secret Lives of Mormon Wives to understand the Mormon church. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Or any other type of media.
Saying unscripted might differ.
This is it.
Cassie, you're tuning in all the most important stuff. Mormon Stories Podcast, Secret Lives. You're good.
Yeah, I just think we're touching on every aspect of the human condition through this Secret Lives discourse.
No, that's why over half of our audience has never been Mormon. People are connecting. I say the Mormon story is the human story. Am I reaching?
No, that's so true, John.
The Secret Life of Mormon Wives is also the human story.
The human story. All right. Anyway, thank you, Cassie, for that super chat. We always welcome your super chats. We want to thank those of you who donate to Mormon Stories Podcast who make it possible. We also want to ask, if you value this content and want to see it continue, we have monthly donors that cancel every month, 10 to 20 of them. And if we don't replace them, then we have to start cutting panelists, cutting services, cutting programming. So if you value this content, if you want to see it continue, if you want to see us do a 3rd episode and to cover future series of reality TV on Mormonism or the other good stuff we do, please go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. And we'll do this for as long as we can. Also, again, support Zelf on the Shelf. Check out No Nonsense Spirituality, buy Britt's book. Go to her for coaching. Sammy also does coaching. Sammy, what's your website for coaching?
SamanthaShelleyCoaching.com.
And Liz, what's your coaching website? I'm just kidding.
I would love to DM me and we can gossip. You know,
Okay, that's
I can
good.
help you.
Peer-to-peer coaching.
Exactly. Yeah, peer to peer. It's important.
And Gerardo, what's your coaching website?
And I'm not a coach.
I'm
You guys
kidding.
need to get your acts together.
Yeah, seriously.
Can you be an ex-Mormon content creator and
don't-
not be a coach?
I don't
You
think
shouldn't.
so.
It's not right.
You don't recommend it? All right. Anyway, thanks for all your support. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. Check out Real, I always forget it. What is it? Real Secret Lives of Mormon Wives on Hulu. Share this episode with as many people as you can. Thanks to Julie and Maven and Brooklyn for all they do behind the scenes and post-production, along with Gerardo, all our co-hosts. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. We'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care, everybody.
To be good to each other.